Chapter 72. The communicator couldn't be contacted, and the other communication and positioning devices couldn't be used either. There was no parachute, and the emergency cabin couldn't be opened. Logically speaking, under such circumstances, the pilot in the cockpit wouldn't be feeling well either. This was what the officers wanted to see. In a situation of near despair and helplessness, the students would better reflect the situation. The officers were looking forward to the four fellows' reactions, but reality slapped them hard in the face. Knight's reaction was understandable. He definitely had a certain level of understanding towards the situation, and it was to be expected that he could face it calmly. However, C.I. Jincheng was even calmer than Knight. Knight was more or less worried about the other three, but C.I. Jincheng had nothing to worry about at all. The moment the mechanical system lost its function, C.I. Jincheng calmly took out a book and read it with great interest. C.I. Jincheng did not forget to nod and smile politely at the hidden monitor before he started reading. The officers inside the control room immediately darkened. Boring. Then they looked at Lung. Lung blanked out for 2 seconds after the power system failed. Then, he said disdainfully, "I can't believe the great military would buy such inferior goods. I remember that the military's allocation was pretty good. Could it be that there were only some defective goods left when the resources were allocated here?" Lung muttered to himself endlessly, completely ignoring the falling fighter. In the end, he even came to a conclusion: the troops stationed at the border were all stepmothers. Although their communicators were jammed and could not communicate, there were still hidden monitors inside the cockpit. The officers heard every word of Lung's words without missing a single word. Inside the control room, the team leader looked at the stationed officers with eyes full of sympathy. It wasn't that he truly agreed with Lung's words, but that he pitied them for being looked down upon by Lung. The stationed officers were so angry that they almost spat blood. This place was not like the primitive zones at the edge of the 13 backward sectors. Even if this was the border, it was the border between Sector C and Sector B. How could it compare to a primitive border? Moreover, the highly armed fighter jets were not placed in the student camp here. They were placed elsewhere. Not only did they fail to scare Lung this time, they were even looked down upon by him. This was just the beginning. After Lung was done with his disdain, the fighter descended to about 10,000 meters or so. Lung suddenly took out a small square box from his pocket and ejected it from one of the fighter's ports. The small square box was split into 5 small pieces and attached to the wings, fuselage, and tail respectively. In Lung's hand was a palm-sized control device. When he pressed a button, a large fan extended out from the 5 small pieces, and the fighter's falling speed abruptly slowed. In the end, it seemed as if it was a thin piece of paper floating in the air. Lung operated the control instrument in his hand, and the small piece on the tail spat out some white mist. As a result, the officers in the control room watched as Lung piloted this fighter whose power system had failed yet was still drifting about leisurely, drawing a large smiley face in the air. Gerard was still holding his forehead. He really didn't know how to describe the young master of the Andriera family. As for Sillin, when the power system failed, Sillin glanced around the cockpit, then opened a part of the cockpit, removed the remote controller inside, opened the control panel, and re-entered the program decoding control on the control panel that popped up. At the same time, the person in front of the screen in the control room was also typing in the control program to stop Sillin from decoding. 15 seconds later, the screen in the control room showed "Control disconnected." This meant that the control of that plane was now completely in Sillin's hands. The face of the officer in front of the screen immediately flushed red, and he couldn't say a word for a long time. He was played by an academy, and in less than 20 seconds no less. Gerard patted his shoulder. "There's nothing to be embarrassed about. His teacher is Mo Heng, Sir Mo. He only needs a small compound knife to tear the entire fighter into pieces, and then put it back together in one piece." Although Gerard's words were slightly exaggerated, they couldn't deny that Sillin's ability had truly shocked them. After Sillin had gained control of the fighter, he turned on the power system once more and piloted the fighter down. It didn't take long before Sillin saw C.I. Jincheng and Knight's fighter take flight once more, and the power system had returned to normal. The 4 of them found a parking spot and landed their fighter. Knight also told Sillin and the other two about this common military trick. Most of the time, the fighter the new students piloted had been tampered with and could be controlled remotely. Sometimes, the officers would play with a broken wing, the power system would fail, and the energy would suddenly drop to zero. These were all things the officers played with the students, but it was also through these little tricks that the officers would re-evaluate the students' abilities. Don't be so mysterious. My grandfather once said that we can't completely rely on others in times of danger. We have to learn to save ourselves, and learn to prepare for a rainy day. Lung tossed the little square box in his hand, and then gave Sillin a thumbs up. But Sillin is really amazing. He forcefully seized control of the fighter. It's like he gave the controller a slap in the face. How arrogant! When the four of them returned to the camp, the surrounding students looked at them with obviously different gazes. Surd, Hard, and the others were very impressed by the fact that the four of them had been toyed with by their officers, and if they were the ones in that situation, they would definitely be laughed at by their officers. Although they didn't know how the four of them had handled it, it didn't affect their opinion of the four of them. The people from the military academies, on the other hand, had even more complicated gazes. Not everyone could make their officers fly into a rage, and looking at the faces of those officers today, other than Senior Colonel Gerard, none of them looked good. Sigh, I really want to know how they handled it. Yulu leaned on the railing and sighed. Really looking forward to it. Feng Haichao closed the display device in his hand. It could only show the flight situation of the fighter, but not the reactions of the pilots inside the fighter. Knight knew quite a few of the people who came from the military academies, such as Stantine from the 2nd Military Academy. So during dinner, Knight was called down by Stantine for a drinking contest. Not long after Knight left, the communicators of Sillin and the other two rang. Come quickly, you three. Fuck, they're shamelessly trying to wear us down. The 2nd Military Academy's accommodation was on the 6th floor, and Seven Lights' accommodation was on the 8th floor. When Sillin and the other two went down, the 10 people from the 2nd Military Academy and Knight were gathered around a table in the living room of her accommodation. Knight's feet were on a stool, his hands were on his hips, and his face was already red from drinking. When he saw Sillin and the other two coming over, he snorted and laughed. Brothers from my accommodation, the four of us will fight it out with you today, and you think we can't take you down? Hurry up and call the rest of your people over, or else you'll say that we're bullying you with numbers again. Don't you have a girl with you? Stantine snickered. No need, the four of us are enough. Once Knight's stubbornness flared up, no one could change his mind. Yeah, the four of us are enough. I'll take care of 4 of them, and you can split the remaining 6 among yourselves. Sillin walked to the table and said, Bang. Before the people from the 2nd Military Academy could voice their opinions, Knight had already slammed the table. I'll take 4, you can split the remaining 6 among yourselves. Lung patted Knight's shoulder. Sigh, there's no need to fight. We'll each take 3, and leave the last one for C.I. Jincheng. C.I. Jincheng raised an eyebrow and said nothing. How are we going to drink? Sillin asked. Nonsense, of course we're going to drink the whole bottle in one go. Are you going to sip it mouthful by mouthful like a girl? Stantine yelled. Without another word, Sillin picked up a bottle and chugged it straight away. The bottle was empty in 5 seconds. All right, as expected of Shadow X. I've been wanting to compete with you since a long time ago. Stantine picked up a bottle and started chugging it down. That night, the 2nd Military Academy's leading officer's face was so dark that a storm was brewing. The 10 of them were actually taken care of by the 4 of them. Knight had drunk too much, and he himself collapsed after taking care of the 3 of them. He was dragged back by Sillin. Lung also drank too much, but his performance was that he was overly excited, yelling about playing cards, singing if he didn't play cards, acting shamelessly if he didn't sing, and refusing to leave. Sillin dragged Knight back upstairs first, and then came over with C.I. Jincheng to grab one of Lung's hands each, forcefully pulling him back upstairs. That night, Lung sang love songs for the entire night. Fortunately, the soundproofing of every dorm room was pretty good, or else the instructors might just feed him bullets. After the commotion was over, the official integrated warfare battle began after everyone from the 10 academies had arrived. The second military academy's people rubbed their palms together. They lost in a drinking contest and were called up in the middle of the night by their commanding officer to sober up. This grudge must be avenged. Chapter 73. 10 teams departed from planet CN-976 at the same time and headed towards their destination planet CN-300. Both planets were located at the edge of Sector C and were supervised by the military. Each team was assigned a small starship, and more than 100 engineering robots assisted the starship in other matters. However, this was only limited to the journey to the destination. Once they arrived at the space station outside the destination planet, these 100 or so engineering robots would enter hibernation mode and could not be brought into the planet to be used as a force to attack other team members. Once they arrived at the space station outside the destination planet, the team members would all change to the spaceplane prepared at the space station and head towards the planet's stronghold. At that time, there would truly only be 10 participating team members. If any technical problems occurred, it would be up to each team member to solve it themselves. The team members were not allowed to bring their own weapons, and they were all distributed by the camp. If there were any special requirements, they could apply for it, and the items applied for would be reviewed by the camp's person in charge. Only those who met the requirements could be brought in. Subspace containers were not allowed to be brought in, and food, energy boxes, and so on were all distributed by the camp as well. This meant that the 10 teams were basically equipped the same way. Only a unified baseline could tell the strengths and weaknesses of each school's students. Gerard and the other team leaders were not allowed to go with the team members, and could only take another spaceplane. Moreover, they could only stay at the space station of planet CN-300 during the integrated warfare. They were not allowed to interfere with the students' actions. The students' mission was to gather 10 energy blocks, and whoever handed in 10 energy blocks first would be the first to complete the mission. There were a total of 100 energy blocks, and they were all buried beforehand. Only the person in charge of the project knew the location of each energy block. No one else knew anything about these energy blocks. Although on average each team would be given 10 energy blocks, that was not the case. The spaceplanes parked at the stronghold also consumed energy, and the defense system installed on the spaceplanes after landing, energy consumption for living, energy consumption for electronics, and so on all consumed energy. Normally speaking, a team member would need to gather a total of 12 to 13 energy blocks in order to successfully complete a mission. 10 would be used to hand in the mission, and the rest would be used for energy consumption. Seven Light's 10-man team was led by Knight, and Cylin was the vice captain. Knight might look like he couldn't be bothered with you on normal days, but he would become a lot steadier when he truly shouldered responsibility. The 10 teams from the 10 universities gathered at the port not far from the camp and headed towards planet CN-300. Asteroid CN-300 was the battlefield of the annual integrated warfare. The mechanization on the planet wasn't very serious. There was a sea, but it wasn't considered a battlefield of the integrated warfare. There were also garrisons and monitoring stations on the planet, but these weren't within the scope of the integrated warfare. Most of the areas on the planet that served as the integrated warfare zone were jungles, but there were also some large lakes. In order to ensure the supply of food for the students, they even raised some small mammals in the forest. There were also fish in the lake. Highly dangerous giant fish and large animals did not exist in the integrated warfare theater. Therefore, in the integrated warfare, the greatest danger came from the students of other universities. Every student was wearing a special sensor suit. The guns distributed in the camp were not the usual lethal ones, but specially modified ones. The students who were shot would be judged as dead by the sensor suit. If they were judged to be dead, the student would be eliminated. At the same time, the military would send them to the monitoring station on the planet, and they would no longer participate in the battle. For Cylin, this was nothing more than a game, a classic educational game with no real life or death involved. But for many students who weren't from military academies, this was their first battle of great significance. Every team had a specific stronghold on this planet. In the early days, when the integrated warfare team members arrived, they had to fight for strongholds themselves, but later on, it slowly developed into direct distribution. There would always be a lake around each stronghold to solve the students' water problem. After smoothly arriving at planet CN-300 space station, the engineering robots inside the starship all entered hibernation mode and didn't move at all. Sillin and the others switched to the spaceplane that had been prepared long ago and piloted it to land. From now on, everything had to be done by the students themselves. The first thing they did after landing wasn't to scan the stronghold for energy blocks or where the nearest energy block was, but to make preparations. Scan the surrounding terrain and open up the photon panels, Knight ordered succinctly. Although they had obtained maps before coming here, those maps were all from last year. There might be special circumstances such as the movement of the Earth's crust that changed the terrain, and they also had to take into account the growth of forests and grasslands as well as the distribution of small mammals. Only after scanning the surroundings and obtaining a real-time map would it be convenient for their subsequent operations. The reason they opened up the photon panels was to conserve energy. They would absorb the light energy of a star and store it, so that they wouldn't have to use the energy blocks that they had painstakingly collected when they ran out of energy. Map acquired. Kong Man's finger moved across the control panel and brought up the map. Analyze the strategic points and begin setting up. After analyzing the strategic points based on the terrain, they had to begin setting up land sentinels for defense within a certain range. They would be able to sound the alarm in time if they were attacked by other team members. Other than that, they also had to set up traps and make corresponding changes according to their own needs. At the same time, CI Jincheng analyzed the weather and predicted the weather for the next 5 days so that it would be easier to formulate a plan of action. On the night they arrived at CN-300, Knight didn't decide to start the operation. Instead, he let everyone rest first, because once the battle started later on, it would be hard for them to have time to rest. They had to maintain their nerves at all times. Therefore, everyone should take a good rest before the other party started. Lung sprinted into the lake to catch some fish. He didn't look nervous at all, it was more like he was on a vacation. During dinner, Knight looked at Sillin and Lung and said, "I heard that the two of you are being watched." The leading officers of each team had told their team members that whoever was able to eliminate either Sillin or Lung would be rewarded handsomely when they got back. The incident the other day had definitely pissed off those officers. This young master was born to shine brightly and be the center of attention. Lung didn't seem to realize that he was being watched at all. Just don't be an idiot when the time comes. The people that each academy needed to be on guard against had already been mentioned long ago, so Knight wouldn't nag anymore. Fu Luo and Kong Man basically didn't participate in any external confrontations. Kong Man was a pure technical member, while Fu Luo was in charge of medical care. Both of them were in charge of logistics. After dinner, the rest of the team members rested, leaving the members on duty to keep watch. The first night watch was Sillin. He was the one who suggested it, and he had already had a good night's sleep on the starship when he arrived. He had to do something to keep watch. Chapter 74. What is this? Knight stared blankly at something placed on a table in the control room. Knight had climbed out of bed early in the morning. When he opened the control room, he found 5 fist-sized warheads placed on the table in front of Sillin. Knight was willing to bet that he had never seen a warhead like this being distributed in the camp. Because the integrated warfare rules stated that air-to-ground weapons were not allowed to be distributed. Surd, Hard and the others had also woken up early. They were also very surprised when they saw these 5 things in the control room. The 5 warheads had spiral patterns on them, like the threads on a screw. CI Jincheng's eyes lit up as he looked at the 5 warheads. There's something inside? That's right. Sillin nodded. CI Jincheng walked over and looked at the warheads carefully, then said, "There's a probe inside?" Sillin gave CI Jincheng a thumbs up and explained, "According to the plan, Knight and Pride will fly us to Sandborder today. Although the plane is not equipped with offensive weapons, it can carry weapons. These 5 warheads are equipped with probes and jamming devices. Knight and Pride will fire these 5 warheads before the plane lands. They will burrow into the ground and send out signals from underground in order to cut off the Sentinel's defense network and investigate the surroundings." Sillin explained the functions of these 5 warheads to everyone. According to the rules of integrated warfare, the aircraft on the aircraft could not be equipped with offensive weapons. Normally, it could only be used to carry people. In the past, there were people who installed some portable weapons, but the results were not very good. Perhaps it was because many students were used to high-tech combat and had gradually neglected some of the most primitive, basic combat methods. Relying too much on high-end technology and weapons of mass destruction was not very meaningful to the development of students. Therefore, in integrated warfare, large-scale offensive weapons were not equipped. Students basically had to carry their guns and mark red, one by one. The so-called mark red was kill. If the sensors on a student determined that the degree of attack was lethal, then the student's clothes would turn red to signify that the student was dead. Thus, marked red, students could only stay where they were and wait for the garrison to come and pick them up. The students marked red would be brought to the monitoring station. Although they had already left the battlefield, they could still watch the battlefield through the monitoring station screen. The academy closest to Silin and the others was Sandborder Academy, who also hailed from Sector B. Sandborder Academy was ranked 8th in total points before the Integrated Warfare Contest, and they were also a relatively famous academy in Sector B. According to Silin's 5 warheads, Knights slightly adjusted the battle plan. If they succeeded, they would be able to shorten the time taken by 3 times. The less time they used, the greater the advantage they would gain. Some teams would look for energy blocks first, but there were also teams that would take care of the competitors that were closer to them first. As the saying went, how could one allow others to sleep next to one's bed? If they did not take care of this competitor, there would be greater resistance when looking for energy blocks. When that happened, the time wasted would not be just a day or 2. It was obvious that Knight had chosen to use a more forceful method. In the past, the other 4 military academies would also choose this method. Basically, the strongholds that were closer to the 4 military academies would be marked red the next day. Therefore, when Sandborder's people found out that the ones next to them were 7 lights and not the 4 military academies, they were so happy that their mouths were almost crooked. There was a huge gap between them and the 4 military academies, but generally speaking, the academies of Sector B were about the same in strength. There was no such thing as an absolute advantage. Even if 7 Lights had produced 2 experts in the form of Knight and Shadow X this year, Sandborder was not too afraid. They weren't military academies, so what the fuck was there to be afraid of? There were 7 people participating in the attack this time. Fu Luo, Kong Man and Ci Jinsheng stayed at the stronghold, while the other 7 joined the attack. Each spaceplane was equipped with 2 airplanes. Knight and Pride piloted one each. Knight brought Silin, Lung and Copley, and Pride brought Surd and Hard. Although Pride had always looked down on others with his nose, he would not be careless when it came to real operations. We're almost at their stronghold. Any closer and we'll be detected by their sentinels. Alright, we'll stop here. Execute Plan A, Knight said into the communicator. Understood. After receiving Knight's notification, Pride turned the plane around and flew in a different direction. After Pride's plane had flown far away, Knight's plane also circled around the surroundings, checking for energy blocks in passing. Unfortunately, there were none nearby. 10 minutes later. Time's up. To prevent the enemy from intercepting their communication, Knight and Pride had set a time. Once the time was up, both sides would fire their warheads at the same time. The trajectory of the warheads was not as close to a straight line as other warheads. Instead, it was irregular, and it was very difficult to predict its next flight trajectory. After the warheads were fired, Knight parked his plane at a certain spot and camouflaged it. Then he, Silin, Lung and Copley began to sneak towards Sandborder. It must be said that Pride's ability was pretty good. When Knight had fired his warhead, Pride had also arrived at the desired location and fired his warhead. When Sandborder's air defense alarm indicated that there were missiles moving at high speed in the air, the students were a little skeptical. Weren't there no air-to-ground weapons? What was up with these 5? However, the air defense system did not indicate that any aircraft had entered the warning zone. Since the missiles were fast and their trajectory could not be captured, plus the fact that they did not expect 7 Lights to attack them at all, and from the air at that, the interception was not successful. The missiles were not aimed at their spaceplane. To be precise, these missiles had just entered the edge of the warning zone. The missiles did not explode after they collided with the ground. Instead, they burrowed straight into the ground, and then everything returned to normal. However, this peace did not last long. Sandborder's people discovered that the Sentinel defense network was beginning to be infiltrated, and the speed of the infiltration was extremely fast. Of course, it would be strange if the two experts, C.I. Jincheng and Kong Man, worked together to infiltrate Seven Light's stronghold. They only lasted for 30 seconds before Sandborder's Sentinel defense network was completely paralyzed. Although they guessed that it might be because of the 5 missiles, they could not solve the problem immediately. After all, those 5 things had burrowed into the ground. Inside the Seven Light spaceplane, C.I. Jincheng turned on his communicator. Infiltration successful. Beginning red marking. Sandborder's Sentinel system had been crippled, but the probe device carried inside the missile could clearly display all the changes in the surroundings on the screen in front of C.I. Jincheng. All C.I. Jincheng needed to do was to inform these situations to the 7 people in charge of the operation. Who was nearby, how far away they were, and how many dangers there were in the surroundings would be explained in detail. At the space station outside of planet CN 300, the 10 team leaders were sitting and watching. There were many screens, and every team's outdoor movements could be seen through satellite surveillance. There was a screen at the center that did not display the movements, but some blue and red dots. Yesterday, this screen was completely blue, but today there were already red dots, and these red dots meant red marking. Every dot contained a student's information, allowing the officers to know who the dot belonged to. From this screen full of dots, it could be seen that the students of the military academies were a lot stronger than the other academies in Sector B. As usual, all the academies that were close to the military academies would be marked red the next day. No matter how much preparation they had made, they would not last past the second day. The team leaders of the 4 military academies were already numb to this situation. Although the team leaders of the academies marked red were prepared, they were more or less displeased in their hearts. The one who was even more displeased than them was Sandborder's team leader. His dark expression alone showed that he was roaring in his heart right now. Watching the Sandborder students marked red by 7 lights on the screen, Gerard sat at the side and picked his teeth leisurely. From time to time, he would even hum a military tune, angering the Sandborder team leader so much that he ground his teeth. Chapter 75. Because those marked red could not speak, Ryan nodded helplessly. He didn't run into Shadow X in the combat tournament, but he didn't expect to be marked red by Shadow X in the integrated warfare contest. This could be considered as a lack of skill. You really are a genius. At the same time, there were 2 other people not far away from them. They separated after communicating with hand gestures. One of them would approach Sillin, and the other would enter the lake while his comrade was holding Sillin back to snatch the energy blocks. In reality, the 5 parties had been rather peaceful for the few days after the red-marked battle. They only searched for the nearby energy blocks and did not attack the other teams. Could it be inside the lake? Lung pointed at the lake and said. Lung believed in Sillin's calculation ability, but the detector could not detect the energy blocks. It was possible that they had used some other protection, or it was inside the lake. There was no way they could completely isolate the energy reaction. If that was the case, they might as well not bury it. Alright, be careful. Celine seemed to be implying something. When she received the detector, she made a secret gesture. Ignoring Ryan and Bon, Sillin Helong left the place and sent an encrypted message to Pride, asking him to come over and take the energy blocks. Sigh, if only I had laxatives. I can sprinkle them down and dissolve them in their lake. Then we can just wait for them to have diarrhea to the point where their vision is blurry and capture them all in one fell swoop and snatch their energy blocks. Lung was getting a little tired of this game of searching for energy blocks. He finally understood that Sillin's goal was to force him to the trap he had set up. He didn't know how the rest of the team would react if they found out that he was marked red by Shadow X. What? Ryan was truly shocked this time. He was so excited that he cried out directly. Sillin marked out the locations of the energy blocks he had found in his mind. Some of them belonged to Seven Lights, and some of them were found by other teams that they knew of. From these burial spots, he could tell what kind of thoughts the person who buried the energy blocks had, and he could speculate the possible burial spots based on this train of thought. Otherwise, it would be a waste of too much time to continue searching blindly like this. Although it was just a game, this was Silen's last academy game after all. He would probably never experience it again in the future. In truth, Silen had not been hoping that these traps made of vines would be able to trap these people from the military academy. He was only using these traps to distract these people. To these people from the military academies, traps like this were fine for catching rabbits, but it was impossible for them to catch their feet. However, it was precisely because they felt that it was impossible that they neglected the extremely short and fatal pause that these things gave them at critical moments. Silen did not adopt a defensive stance. Instead, he used the cover of the forest to force his way towards the man. Up until yesterday, every team had found 2 energy blocks, but early this morning, Knight's team had found another one. Hence, Lung was clamoring to find one as well. He couldn't be outdone by Knight. As for the integrated warfare, that was all Long was interested in. Understood. Silen also recognized Bon. He had seen the name list of the participants in the integrated warfare contest and remembered their faces. Seven Lights' goal was only 5th place in the first place. Judging from the current situation, Seven Lights only needed to dawdle around while the 4 military academies fought for the top 4 spots. The remaining energy blocks were more than enough for them to wreak havoc. However, Gerard was a little dissatisfied. Maybe those guys would give everyone a surprise? Seven Lights had already found 7 energy blocks, but they had used up one of their daily energy consumption. This meant that they still had more than 4 energy blocks to find. After kicking out 5 teams, the search for energy blocks became much easier. Silen nodded, pointed a direction, and walked towards it with Lung. However, there was still no response from the detector even after half a day had passed. There were no mountains around them. It was flat ground, and there was a lake in front of them. After the red marking battle on the second day, half of the 10 teams had been kicked out. Lung. Since he was marked red, the man immediately lay down on the ground and made a strong gesture at Silen. Lung sat down against a tree and pulled at the leaves beside him in boredom. Not far away, Silen closed his eyes and pondered. The man was a little anxious. He knew that Silen was Shadow X, but he didn't expect Silen to approach him so quickly. Moreover, Silen had basically dodged the moment he was about to shoot, as if he could predict it. He knew that Silen was pressing towards him, but he couldn't stop him. The man could only retreat one step at a time. If a bullet could penetrate a tree trunk, it would definitely hit Silen. However, although the guns distributed by the camp were almost as fast as real guns, it was difficult enough to kill a person, much less penetrate a tree trunk. Silen used this to his advantage and swiftly closed in on the newcomer. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The bullets hit the trees that Silen passed by in a flash, but they didn't touch Silen at all. When he saw Silen open his eyes, Lung perked up. "Are you done calculating?" Twisting his neck, Lung took off his jacket, accepted the detector in Silen's hand and jumped into the lake. Not long after, he popped his head out and said excitedly, "There's a reaction, and there are 2 of them." Silen's hands weren't idle while he was closing in. Bullets flew towards the man at tricky angles, but the man was an experienced man. He was able to dodge the bullets while retreating into the forest. Suddenly, there was a thud. Lung was holding 2 energy blocks tied together with rope in one hand and the unconscious man in the other. Lung tossed Bon to the side and smiled until his eyes were slits. "Now we've found 4 blocks, one more than Knight and the others. Let's see how that punk can still show off in front of this young master." The 6 people on patrol were divided into 3 groups. Lung and Silen were in one group, Knight and Copley were in another, and Surd and Hard were in another. Pride was in charge of flying the plane between the 3 groups and the stronghold to deliver supplies. If they found any energy blocks, Pride would send them to the stronghold to prevent the people from the military academies from snatching them away. Before the man closing in on Silen could make a move, Silen turned around and fired a shot. He then quickly left the lakeside and hid in the forest to find cover. The man's gun should have been fitted with a silencer, but Silin didn't have one now. This shot told Lung under the lake that someone was coming. He had sensed someone nearby earlier, so he made a hand signal to tell Lung to be careful. Silin walked up to the man and looked. The second military academy, Ryan? However, energy blocks were harder to find as the tournament progressed. In previous tournaments, it would take around 10 days just to find energy blocks. Sometimes, 1 or 2 days would go by without any results. Ryan's expression changed when he saw the man Lung was carrying. His gaze was complicated. The second military academy might still be left behind this time. Even Bon had been marked red. The rest of them wouldn't be able to hold on for long. And Dryra Lung was much stronger than they had imagined. Marked red. That said, Lung dove back into the lake. HM? Lung tossed the detector to Silin. You don't need to go down. I can handle it myself. Sorry to send you out. Also, Silin pointed in the direction of the lake. Your partner was also sent out. Chapter 76. What kind of effects do these things have? Lung pointed at the various plants that had been sorted out and placed on the rocks. You'll know when the time comes. Silin sorted out the remaining plants in his hands and placed them to one side. In truth, Silin hadn't really thought of using this method at first, but the moment Lung mentioned laxatives, Silin thought of this. Lung had only seen those researchers isolate the medicinal components of plants and then synthesize more drugs according to their molecular formula, but now that he saw Silin doing this, he felt that it was a fresh experience. His choice was right. Forming a team with Silin would definitely not be boring. It seemed like he saw a great business opportunity from this. These things can really work? It wasn't that Lung didn't believe it, but that he found it novel. There were a lot of plants here that he didn't recognize, so he just plucked whatever Silin asked him to. Moreover, the treatment for each plant was different. Some flowers needed pollen, while others needed nectar or petals. Although Lung had memorized these things, he didn't really understand them. Silin pointed at the harvested herbs and said, You know, before we entered the mechanical era, humans didn't have drug synthesizers, injection tubes, antibiotics, analyzers, or any electronic machinery at all. But they were still able to create all kinds of drugs, be it poison or tonics. They used the most primitive methods, and with these, they were able to concoct the drugs we need. We can poison them just like this and make them have diarrhea? Lung narrowed his eyes, as if he could see the scene of those people from the 4th Military Academy bowing together. No, it's useless to poison the lake water. Drinking water is filtered and detoxified. Don't touch those herbs. Silin threw a rock over, hitting Lung's hand that was touching the herbs. These are just grass, and didn't we touch them when we were in the forest before? Lung looked at his right hand. There was a red rash on the hand that had just touched the herbs, itchy and numb. However, this person didn't seem to notice it at all, smiling like he was asking for praise. See, it really works. What are you laughing at? Can you be any more stupid? Silin wanted nothing more than to send this idiot flying with a kick. Next to it was a bottle carved from stone. There were a few other herbs soaked in it, and there was also the fragrance of nectar. Silin poured some out and applied it to Lung. 5 minutes later, the red rashes gradually faded, leaving only faint traces. 10 minutes later, there wasn't even a trace left. As if he had seen a rare object, Lung flipped his right palm left and right, and then used his left hand to touch the herb. Silin, why aren't you reacting? Lung raised his left hand. There wasn't a single red rash. Silin rolled his eyes at him. This is an allergenic drug. After the first allergic reaction, the body will produce antibodies. However, most people won't develop a memory effect so quickly. This means that you have a good physique. Silin had sent a secret message to Knight using a sound wave code. Every sound wave code was defined by themselves, so even if it was intercepted by other teams, they wouldn't know the meaning of the message. While Silin was making the drug and Knight was formulating a plan of action, Surd and Hard ran into the 4th Military Academy. Surd was marked red, and Hard escaped by a fluke. At the same time, at 7 Light's base, Kong Man, who was controlling the Sentinel surveillance, suddenly discovered that a person had appeared in their alert range. Moreover, this person was walking over rather leisurely and openly, and had no intention of hiding at all. Kong Man notified Ci Jincheng and Fu Luo, and both of them were quite familiar with the person on the screen. This guy. Fu Luo did not express her opinion, but she did not ask Kong Man to activate the Sentinel attack either. Ignore him, Ci Jincheng said after a glance. But he's holding a gun. If that guy wants to attack, he won't let you see his gun, much less this kind of gun. All right. Kong Man did not mobilize the Sentinel, but he did not let his guard down either. He had a feeling that the person was very dangerous. However, out of Kong Man's imagination, the person leisurely passed through the Sentinel's alert zone, arrived next to their base's space plane, and openly knocked on the door. Open the door, I'm so tired. Kong Man looked at Ci Jincheng. Ci Jincheng was responsible for the base's work when the others were out on missions. Open the door, it's fine, Ci Jincheng said. Kong Man sighed. Since Ci Jincheng had already said so, and Fu Luo did not express any opinion, Kong Man no longer cared. He opened the cabin door and let the person inside. Yo, Sister Feng, long time no see. The person greeted Fu Luo with a smile after seeing her, looking very familiar. Yu Lu, what are you doing here? Fu Luo raised an eyebrow at the call of Sister Feng and asked. Yu Lu shrugged, it's too noisy over there. They're busy marking the second military academy red, so I came here to sleep since I have nothing to do. Nothing to do. Come here to sleep? Kong Man felt that it was absurd. This person actually had the leisure to find a quiet place to sleep while his teammates were busy marking the red. But looking at Fu Luo and Ci Jincheng's expressions, it seemed that they were already used to this way of saying things. If you're not participating in marking the red, then why are you participating in the integrated warfare contest? Fu Luo asked. To watch the show, of course. Plus, I'm on vacation, so I came here to play since I had nothing to do anyway. Seeing that Kong Man kept staring at the gun in his hand, Yu Lu smiled. With a flick of his finger, the gun in his hand disassembled into several parts and fell neatly on the round table nearby. Kong Man's eyelids twitched. This guy was a dangerous person. Yu Lu yawned and asked, Is there a place to sleep? Find one yourself. Ci Jincheng answered without turning his head. Can I go to the bedroom? No. Yu Lu looked around, dragged a few chairs over and put them together. Then, he laid on top of them and yawned again. Wake me up when they go to turn in their mission. Otherwise, don't wake me even if they're all marked red. After saying that, Yu Lu closed his eyes and went to sleep without caring if anyone else agreed or not. Kong Man was dumbfounded. This person really was a weirdo. Ignore him, pretend he doesn't exist. Ci Jincheng said to Kong Man. How could they ignore such a dangerous person here? Kong Man curled his lips, sat down in front of the monitor and continued his work. 5 minutes later, Kong Man couldn't hold it in any longer and turned to ask Ci Jincheng and Fu Luo, who is he? First Military Academy's second-year student, 18 years old. Known as the First Military Academy's once-in-a-thousand-years shooting prodigy. He sat firmly at the top of the First Military Academy's shooting ranking during his first year, and also started carrying out military missions during his first year. After graduation, he would at least be awarded the rank of second lieutenant in the League of Stars. Fu Luo introduced to Kong Man 18 years old. Second lieutenant in the League of Stars. It wasn't that easy to rise in the ranks of the League of Stars. Guns in the integrated warfare contest aren't really guns to him at all, so he probably didn't fire a single shot in the integrated warfare contest. Listening to Fu Luo's explanation, Kong Man looked towards the person snoring on the chair. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Chapter 77. No, I won't do it. Pride looked like he would never do it even if he was beaten to death. He would rather not pilot the plane and just pick on the people from the other military academies, but he would never do that. He was a pilot of a fighter jet, not a pesticide sprayer. Knight told Pride about the plan when he asked him to come over, and after pondering over Silen's suggestion, Knight reformulated the operation plan. They would spray the pesticide directly from the plane. Not only would it be more efficient that way, the success rate would also be a little higher as well. Since Surd had been marked red, there were only 6 of them left for the operation now. The best combination would be one pilot the plane while the other 5 moved. If they used 2 people to pilot the plane, then 4 people moving would be too much of a stretch. But Pride rejected him directly before he even finished listening. As if he had expected this, Knight did not have much of a reaction and said indifferently, "Then you go mark red, I'll fly the plane. It's the same with or without you anyway." Knight was still muttering as he turned around and left. "Teach, you don't even know how to spray the pesticide, no wonder you lost the plane battle. Let me tell you, goading is useless." Although he said that, Pride's expression clearly showed that he was ready to listen to the plan. Knight curled his lips. He really did not know how the G family had raised such a freak. After ignoring Pride's earlier words and explaining the plan to Pride, Knight sent encrypted messages to both Ci Jinsheng and Silin. Hard was currently on his way to meet up with Silin Helong, and Silin would tell him how to act when the time came. If a game always followed a set pattern, then it would be meaningless. So when Knight heard Silin's suggestion, he was very much in agreement. Perhaps this operation would be an epic-making event in the history of the Sector Championship's integrated warfare. After all, no one had thought of using such a despicable method in the past, right? After the first few days of peace and quiet, the atmosphere between the 4 academies began to grow tense. Usually, at this time, they would start attacking each other. Prometheus High School, which was marked red by the 1st Military Academy, Billy Academy, which was marked red by the 2nd Military Academy, Wagner High School, which was marked red by the 3rd Military Academy, Kirilag High School, which was marked red by the 4th Military Academy, and Sandborder Academy, which was marked red by 7 Lights, were all there. There were also military academies which were marked red by the 1st Military Academy, such as Ryan and Bon. When Surd was first brought there, he was filled with emotions, and the people from the other universities looked at him strangely. It was not the gaze of a loser, but one of curiosity and fear of the unknown. Of course, the people from Sandborder were definitely not friendly. 7 Lights was truly unusual this year. No one had expected that 7 Lights would adopt the same offensive strategy as the military academies, and the time they took to eliminate Sandborder was not any longer than the other 4 military academies. There were many people who hoped that 7 Lights could be the dark horse this time and step on one or more of the 4 military academies. If that happened, then the legend of the military academies would be broken. When Ryan and Bon were brought to the surveillance station, many people looked as if they had seen a ghost. Bon especially, he was a special class student. Although they had never seen him participate in the Sector Championships arena before, it was publicly acknowledged that Bon was stronger than Ryan. There were a lot of screens in the surveillance station, and through the multi-angle view of the satellite array, it was possible to watch the actions of the people who were not marked red. Every academy and every student's focus was different. Many of them were paying close attention to Shadow X and Lung, because the instructors had declared that they would pay close attention to them. But now, they no longer had that chance, so they could only wait and see who could mark these 2 people red. It was because of this that some people were able to see Bon and Lung's scene. No one saw what happened under the surface of the lake. The only thing they knew was that when Lung surfaced to the shore, he was carrying an unconscious Bon. Then, he threw Bon on the shore and marked him red. At that moment, many people could not help but shudder, including a couple of military officers. In truth, Bon himself did not know what happened at the time. After he dove into the lake and swam downstream, he could clearly sense Lung's position. But just as he was about to act, Lung suddenly changed direction and swam straight towards him. That kind of speed. Bon felt that it was not something a human could possess. At the time, Bon felt more like he was facing a certain sea monster in the deep sea. But before Bon could react, his vision turned black and he fainted. When he woke up, he was already at the surveillance station. It was exactly because 7 Lights was the center of attention that when Surd was brought here, many people tried to strike up a conversation and fish for information. However, Surd was not in the mood to deal with other people right now. Since he was marked red, 7 Lights operation team would probably make some changes. Surd switched his observation point and observed the actions of every person in Seven Lights. After cooperating with them for so many days, Surd had some understanding of their operation methods. Suddenly, Surd's hand paused as he pressed the switch button. He zoomed in on the image, and when he saw clearly, he immediately narrowed his eyes. This was because when he switched to Pride's observation point, he discovered that there was a device on Pride's plane, and Surd was absolutely certain that it was Silin's handiwork. What kind of dirty trick did Silin come up with this time? Surd prepared to lock his observation point onto Pride. He knew that this thing Silin had installed on the plane would definitely be the fuse if there was an operation. Moreover, it was definitely the highlight of this operation. When someone saw that Surd had locked his observation point onto Pride, they also adjusted their observation point and stared at Pride. Although they did not know what was going to happen on Pride's side, since Surd had chosen to lock onto Pride's point, they would do the same. Surd was a Seven Lights member after all, and they should have some sort of tacit understanding with each other. Yes, something was definitely going to happen. At the same time, there were also some students who did not notice Surd's actions and were observing the other people in Seven Lights who began to shout, "Seven Lights is playing with fire this time. It looks like they're taking action, and it's against the 4th Military Academy." Seven Lights group was heading towards the 4th Military Academy's stronghold. They're actually targeting the 4th Military Academy's stronghold. Isn't that a little too bold? Some students began to pay serious attention when they heard these words, but even more people chose to pay attention to the 1st Military Academy right now. This was because the 1st Military Academy and the 2nd Military Academy were in a heated battle right now, and the battle between the military academies was very entertaining, intense, and enjoyable to watch. That was why they chose the 1st Military Academy between Seven Lights and the 1st Military Academy, and that was why they would regret it later on. Half a day ago, the 3rd Military Academy had attacked the 4th Military Academy's stronghold, but the 4th Military Academy's personnel had returned quickly, and their defense was excellent. After both sides had one person marked red, the 3rd Military Academy's personnel saw that their attack was futile, and logically speaking, it was unwise to attack the 4th Military Academy's stronghold at this time because almost all of the 4th Military Academy's personnel had returned to the stronghold, and the person who marked Surd red had also returned to the stronghold. An hour later. Holy shit, what the hell is this? The people who had pointed their observation point at Pride roared. Chapter 78. The cry attracted a lot of people, and those who saw the scene could not help but sigh. Seven Lights sure was a troublemaker. Pride's piloting skills were indeed pretty good. Although he'd lost 2 out of 3 mech battles against Knight, and perhaps in terms of attack power, Pride was still slightly weaker than Knight. If he didn't attack and only dodged, even Knight would have a hard time finding gaps in Pride's flight. The 4th Military Academy was very surprised by Seven Lights' attack. They actually chose this time to attack their base when all their members were present. Had Seven Lights gone mad this time? But in the Sentinel alarm, only Pride who was piloting the plane appeared. No one else from Seven Lights could be seen. However, since Pride was here, the others could not be far away either. The 4th Military Academy began to enter a state of alert. Although Seven Lights was not from Sector C, there were a few very troublesome people in Seven Lights. Therefore, the 4th Military Academy decided to be careful to avoid unexpected failure. The strange thing was that Pride was only flying the plane around the perimeter. The Sentinels outside the 4th Military Academy's base did not have much firepower, and their ground-to-air firepower was lacking. This was why Pride could leisurely circle around the perimeter. Ignore him. Let him do as he pleases, the 4th Military Academy's captain said. He felt that Pride would not do something like this because he was bored to death. There must be someone behind this, and Seven Lights was definitely plotting something. Therefore, he chose to deal with the situation with inaction. After all, the other party was only hanging around the perimeter. However, Pride's hanging around did not last long before it started to deteriorate. The thick brown-yellow smoke sprayed out of the plane gradually moved towards the 4th Military Academy's base along with the breeze. Pride flew the plane back and forth with the wind, and the brown-yellow smoke grew thicker and thicker. The optical equipment could not see the scene inside the smoke at all. At the surveillance station, the students saw this scene of brown-yellow smoke. They're actually using smoke? That's not the point. How did they get this smoke? The camp did not distribute anything related to smoke grenades at all. Inside the 4th Military Academy spaceplane, the technical student did not grow nervous because of the brown-yellow smoke. Just because the optical equipment was not good didn't mean there was no other way. Smoke is already outdated. Before he could finish, he noticed a missile warning. It was the same missile that Seven Lights had used to slaughter Sandborder. However, the 4th Military Academy was also capable of intercepting 2 of the 3 missiles, and only one managed to burrow into the ground. When they learned of Seven Lights' method of dealing with Sandborder, the people of the 4th Military Academy had already made relevant preparations. That was why they were able to adjust their interceptions in time when the missiles appeared. Even if they missed one, they could immediately start the anti-invasion program. But a sentinel in the outer perimeter has been destroyed. Destroy it with manpower. Someone has infiltrated the smoky area. Although the invasion on Seven Lights' side had yet to succeed, it did cause some trouble for the Sentinel system and made it less responsive. This gave the infiltrator an opportunity to take advantage of, and once they had infiltrated, destroying the Sentinel that had been disturbed by the invasion would be a walk in the park. Seven Lights' main breakthrough point was the missile that had successfully burrowed into the ground, because radar detection was useless in that area. Moreover, that area was also shrouded in brownish-yellow smoke. Seven Lights must have made preparations beforehand, and the 4th Military Academy would not be able to gain the upper hand if they sent their men over. At the same time, the smoke was spreading towards them, and Seven Lights could also follow the smoke and break in. If they did not take measures in time, it would be troublesome if they were to break in. Captain, I'm going to read to them. I'm going too. Me too. Wait. The 4th Military Academy's medical student frowned and said, I've analyzed the smoke's composition, but because the equipment we're equipped with isn't fully functional, we don't know if they're harmful to the human body even if we've analyzed their composition. From the analysis of the smoke's composition, it could be concluded that most of the smoke came from the plants on this planet. Everyone had come into contact with these plants in the forest, and there were introductions about the plants and animals on this planet since a long time ago. There was no mention of any of them being highly toxic, and even if they were only slightly toxic and would not cause much damage. However, the medical student couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Although every one of them looked harmless, there was no guarantee that they would be lethal if they were mixed together. Because of the smoke, there was no telling if the Seven Lights people were wearing protective gear, and they did not have equipment with more complete functions to conduct an in-depth analysis. There was no way to determine the harmfulness of the smoke. Back at the camp, they were routinely issued a head-to-toe protective suit, but for the longest time, very few people participating in the integrated warfare contest would wear it. It was because it would slightly affect their movements after wearing it, and in a battle between experts, the slightest bit of shadow was fatal. Therefore, more people would not wear protective suits. For safety's sake, 2 of the 4 people who went out wore protective suits, and the other 2 did not, but they did wear gas masks. It did not take long after the quartet entered the smoke zone to discover an anomaly. First, the Seven Lights people were not wearing protective suits, so the 2 4th Military Academy people who were wearing protective suits were taken out by Knight and Silen each. Second, the 2 4th Military Academy people who were not wearing protective suits discovered that a lot of red rashes had appeared on the surface of their bodies where they came into contact with the smoke. They were itchy and numb, and they were showing signs of spreading to their surroundings. Even though they were trained, it was very difficult for them to endure this forever. At the same time, they had to stay alert for any attacks around them. However, the duo did not last long before they were marked red as well. The 2 people who were marked red because they were not wearing protective suits wanted to cry but had no tears as they stared at the red rashes on their bodies and lay on the ground like corpses. Yo, you 2 look pretty comfortable. Lung walked over with an infuriating smile on his face. You guys are so fucking despicable. To think that you would use such a thing. One of the people lying on the ground said, All's fair in war. This is called skill, understand? It was obvious that the duo understood it as well. It was just that they felt uncomfortable on the inside, and that was all they said. Lung looked at them with a pitiful expression on his face. He took out a bottle and poured the liquid inside on the two men's rashes. When he saw that the red rashes were gradually receding, Lung turned around with a smug look on his face. As expected, this young master has the potential to be the savior of the world. The two people lying on the ground really wanted to violate the rules and shoot this bastard Red. It's obvious that this thing isn't something you, young Master Lung, can make. What the hell are you showing off for? At the surveillance station, the students could not see the situation inside the smoke. They only knew that the 4 people who went in were marked red. What the hell is going on? The 4th Military Academy is screwed this time. Seven Lights is truly amazing. I didn't think that they would actually be able to hack a military academy team. Surd was very happy right now. He was the one who was marked red by the 4th Military Academy, and now that the 4th Military Academy had been forced into such a state, it was obvious that they would not be able to hold on much longer if this continued. Surd felt a wave of satisfaction when he got his revenge for being marked red, but he regretted that he was not able to participate in this significant red mark battle. At first, the 2nd Military Academy thought that they would definitely be at the bottom this time. Due to Ryan and Bond's accident being marked red, the 2nd Military Academy's strength had greatly decreased. This was also the reason why the 1st Military Academy had set their eyes on them. However, they did not expect to receive another piece of news at this time. The 4th Military Academy had been completely wiped out, and they had been wiped out even earlier than they were. The 2nd Military Academy's originally heavy hearts immediately lightened up. Chapter 79. After the 2nd and 4th Military Academies had been eliminated, the game was almost over. 1st Military Academy was the first to collect all 10 energy blocks, and to everyone's surprise, Seven Lights had collected the energy blocks 2 hours earlier than 3rd Military Academy, obtaining 2nd place for the first time in history. The higher-ups of Seven Lights were probably so happy that their mouths were crooked. God knows how many people would rack their brains to squeeze into Seven Lights next year. In the space station, the officers were sitting inside the observation room. Unlike when they were at the camp, the observation room was quieter right now. The officers were all silent, and everyone except Gerard looked like they were deep in thought. Gerard was very happy. These kids sure lived up to expectations. He had to thank O'Neill for not having the time this time, or this cushy job would never have fallen into his hands. Although he was a little reluctant when he took over, now it looked like it was a cushy job indeed. Gerard, just what is that kid's background? The leading officer of 1st Military Academy pointed at Cylin on the screen with his chin and asked. He's from the Duance family. I don't know how he grew up to be like this. Gerard expressed that he did not know either. About that modified missile, it's not something an ordinary engineer can do. Also, Surmo probably didn't teach him to make that thing, did he? Although it was theoretically possible to make something out of those materials, in reality, the officers had yet to see any of their integrated warfare students able to do so. The first time Seven Lights used that modified missile, there were 5 of them, and they had all been used to slaughter Sandborder. The materials inside the spaceplane were only enough to modify 5 missiles, and after the slaughter of Sandborder, Cylin had dismantled some usable materials from Sandborder's spaceplane and made the 3 missiles used to attack the 4th Military Academy's stronghold later on. I don't know about that. Why don't you ask Surmo? Gerard said helplessly. The leading officer of 1st Military Academy shook his head like he was having a cramp. I'm not going. Actually, this kind of talent can totally be absorbed into the army as soon as possible. It's too wasteful to let him develop outside. Another officer lamented. Gerard squinted at him disdainfully. You think we haven't tried? During the last Seven Lights mission, that kid performed very well, and he was even chosen by a lieutenant general sent down from above. Later on, that lieutenant general went to Surmo to ask for him, but Surmo scolded him so hard that he didn't even dare to make a sound on the spot. Even O'Neill and I were scolded so badly that we couldn't even lift our heads for a few days. The moment we saw Sir Mo's car, we ran away as fast as we could. The others fell silent. They had some understanding of Mo Heng, so they could imagine what had happened. Even a lieutenant general was scolded to such an extent, so they, the field officers, should just forget about it. As the integrated warfare ended, the cadets had to return to the starship docked in the space station. This time, the officers were accompanying them. In order to commend everyone, Gerard deliberately used his connections to get some wine from the garrison of planet CN-300. CN-300 to CN-976 could be considered a military route. There was no danger, and it was fine as long as there were robots piloting the starship. Everyone drank a little crazily, and even Fu Luo, who usually didn't drink much, drank a little. Adding that to their tense nerves during this period of time, they all slept in their rooms until they landed after drinking. After landing at planet CN-976 camp and holding a summary meeting, the 10 teams returned to their respective academies. Sillin, Seven Lights held a banquet for us. Hard said excitedly while holding a microcomputer. The Sector Championship Forum was in a state of excitement right now, especially the people of Seven Lights. They raised their heads no matter where they went. In the past, they would subconsciously think that they were 3 points lower when they saw a military academy on the Sector Championship platform, but it was different now. They were the second place and no longer the eternal 5th place. The academy didn't even need to say anything. The students of Seven Lights had spontaneously held a welcoming banquet, and the higher-ups of Seven Lights had directly upgraded the 10 people's Seven Lights cards to green card rank. There were related events at Nightless City and the financial and trade zones, and the 10 people were invited to be their spokespersons. In short, the 10 people were on fire. Their graduation certificates would have a glittering symbol of the runner-up, and it was not something that the previous integrated warfare participants could compare to. Hee, there's even a photo of us in our uniforms. I'm going to post the photos of us on planet CN-300 later. It'll definitely charm a bunch of girls. We're even going to auction a specimen with our signature on it. Lung's eyes shone brightly. Lung had collected some plants and rocks on planet CN-300, made the plants into specimens, and had everyone else sign their names on them in preparation for the auction. The rocks should look pretty good if they were to bring them back to be processed. This time we're going to make a killing when we get back. When the time comes, I'm going to open a little shop at the financial district. You guys must come and support me, especially you, Sillin. You're going to dress up as Shadow X and act as the shop's mascot. Seeing Lung's excited look, Sillin smiled. Sure. Not far away, C.I. Jincheng frowned slightly. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with Sillin's smile. Moreover, the feeling that Sillin gave him during the integrated warfare this time was a little strange. Sillin's performance in the integrated warfare contest was more proactive than C.I. Jincheng had imagined. C.I. Jincheng was a man who was good at analysis, and those who were good at mathematics usually had stronger logical analysis abilities. He could infer things that no one else would know from small clues. Perhaps no one else would notice Sillin's smile just now, or they wouldn't think anything of it even if they did, but C.I. Jincheng couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen next. Hard, Copley and the others were looking forward to returning to Planet Seven Lights. Through the Sector Championships network, they already knew what the current port looked like on Planet Seven Lights. All kinds of slogans, all kinds of billboards with their images, all kinds of fresh flowers and beautiful women. The scene at the port had already been reflected on the forums. All that was left was for them to land. One had to admit that this kind of feeling was truly exciting. Copley wasn't the center of attention in the past. He didn't participate in that biohazard mission, and his influence in Seven Lights wasn't high either. But through this competition, everything about Copley had been dug out. His background, his various information, the courses he had chosen, the other honors he had obtained and so on were all known to everyone. In comparison, Knight was much calmer. Well, he couldn't say he was calm. It should be said that he didn't feel much at all. The integrated warfare contest was just a game in the first place, a game without life and death battles. Knight wanted to laugh the moment he saw the comments on the forums about how they were stronger than the military academies. Stronger? Stronger my ass. Surd, Copley, Hard, and Pride might not even be able to survive in a true life and death battlefield. That was why Knight didn't put this game in his heart at all. Under the fervent and expectant gazes of the 7 Lights students, the space plane landed at the port. This time, it wasn't the training division's port, but 7 Lights' main port. Because there were too many students who requested to participate in the welcoming ceremony, 7 Lights decided to let the spaceplane land at the main port in order to make the welcoming scene a little more spectacular. At the same time, they could also spread this kind of atmosphere to others and attract more people to 7 Lights University. The elevator descended, and after the leader Gerard and his entourage came down, the participants of the integrated warfare contest came out one after another. Their blue uniforms and rainbow-patterned school insignia were especially eye-catching amidst the hubbub of voices. All kinds of close-up shots and videos from every angle were being streamed live on 7 Lights Network at the same time. Entertainment Sleepless City, Financial Trade Zone, Training Division, Research Division, School District, Dormitory District, and so on. Sillin was wearing a perfect smile, but Knight still had a straight face. There was even an impatient expression on his face. Pride still had his chin raised high, his arrogance obvious. C.I. Jincheng was very calm. Lung was smiling brightly and throwing kisses from time to time. Kong Man was a little nervous. Hard Smile was a little stiff. However, it was at this moment. The bullet pierced through the body, bringing with it a splash of blood. The video recording was transmitting everything as it happened to every part of 7 Lights. Everything happened so suddenly. Chapter 80. Following Sillin's collapse, the students at the port began to scream. The excitement from before was completely gone, replaced by panic as they swarmed out of the port in large numbers. If not for the police department's control, stampedes, flying car collisions, and other incidents would have happened one after another. In truth, the school had allowed a lot more people to enter the airport for the sake of publicity, so it was inconvenient for the security team and the training division to move around. However, since there had never been an assassination in public for the past 100 years, they had overlooked it. Gerard and the others were pushed to the side the moment they came down. Because the school had arranged for a ceremonial team to welcome the 10 participating students, Gerard and the others were blocked. That was why Gerard could not determine the attacker's location at first notice. Knight's body was trembling. He felt his throat being squeezed and oppressed. Knight had once been brought by his father to quell a rebellion. Although he did not truly come into contact with that cruel battlefield, he had watched from afar as people were sent flying, collapsed, and splattered with blood. It was just that it was not as painful as it was now. After all, he was not friends with those people, and the ones who had collapsed were his roommates and teammates who drank and carried guns with him. Be it Knight, Gerard, or the other people who were sent down from the military, none of them felt any killing intent at all. No killing intent, no killing intent. It was just a sudden shot. They were truly powerless, and they could not analyze the attacker's location in time. They did not find anything unusual from the surveillance footage sent over from various areas. Without hesitation, Lung took out a drug and injected it into the fallen Sillin. He had always carried it with him to save his life in an emergency. The drug would stimulate the patient's life potential to the maximum, allowing the wounded to obtain greater vitality. After the injection, Lung immediately dialed a number. It was his private medical team in 7 Lights. They had the most advanced analyzers there. He would not put all his hopes on the people of 7 Lights. Fu Luo and the medical staff who had rushed over immediately performed first aid. She could tell at a glance that although the bullet did not hit the heart, it was very close to the heart. Under normal circumstances, Sillin's condition should not be this bad. From the looks of it, there should be other substances in the bullet. After the bullet penetrated Sillin's body, it hit the spaceplane behind it and swiftly disintegrated into powder. There was no way to analyze anything else from the bullet, but it was enough to show that this assassination was prepared. Since Lung had injected Sillin with medicine as soon as the accident happened, Sillin's vital signs were still relatively stable even before he was carried into the emergency cabin. However, he did not expect that on the way to the emergency room, his life signal would rapidly weaken. Before any effective measures could be taken, the life indicator showed that he was dead. Even so, the paramedics still sent Silin to the emergency room for resuscitation, but to no avail. Lung's private medical team also came over, but just like before, they were powerless to save the situation. The toxin was a kind of plant toxin that originated from Sector Z. It was hard to come by in the first place, and the antidote was also rare in the first place. However, the antidote's molecular formula was known, but by the time the antidote was synthesized, its life signal had already stopped. Nat had smashed several walls of the hospital. Although the people in the hospital were infuriated by Knight's bloodshot eyes and murderous aura, they dared not say anything in front of him. The rest of Seven Lights really did not dare to forcefully drag Knight and Lung, these two people who were brimming with killing intent. However, the duo had left hurriedly after receiving the communication. No one knew what had happened. Aflon, who had become the heir of the Duance family, had sent a message regarding Silin's assassination. Very soon, Aflon's men had come over to send Silin's body and belongings back. Knight and Lung had received C.I. Jincheng's call. Right now, all parties were investigating, but they still had no clue as to who the assassin was. There was no progress at all. The moment they heard that there was news from C.I. Jincheng, the duo quickly returned to the dormitory. C.I. Jincheng was sitting in the living room. He was the calmest person to react to today's incident. Knight was very dissatisfied with C.I. Jincheng's performance, and this dissatisfaction was directly manifested in his tone. "Speak." Lung did not speak and sat down on the sofa. His killing intent had not been concealed yet, but his complexion was very bad. Those who knew Lung would know that this kind of behavior meant that a storm of blood would soon follow. Lung had never been a kind person. C.I. Jincheng did not mind Knight's tone at all. Instead, he passed over his personal tablet. "This is the message I've deciphered from the code Silin left behind. Take a look first." When Silin was shot, C.I. Jincheng was the closest to him, and it was obvious that this was not a coincidence. After Silin had collapsed, C.I. Jincheng had crouched next to him. At the time, C.I. Jincheng was also very worried and nervous, but when he saw the movements of Silin's fingers, he knew that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. That was also a type of code. It was different from the one Silin had used in the double combat tournament. It was a more complicated code. The former was faster, while the latter was more difficult to decipher. It required multidimensional decoding and matrix analysis. Silin's movements at the time were rather subtle. Even if the medical personnel saw it, they would only think that it was caused by a spasm. After reading the contents of the tablet, the killing intent on Knight and Lung's bodies receded, but their faces were a little twisted. Right now, they wanted nothing more than to drag Silin out of the hospital and give him a good whipping. Knight even purposely ran over to Silin's room to take a look. "Fuck, there's nothing substantial at all. It was all prepared a long time ago." In the information on the tablet, Silin had only briefly explained that this matter had been arranged, and that they did not need to worry. Also, Silin Duance was also going to disappear from this world. The reason why he gave such an explanation was firstly because of trust. Silin had confidence in the trio. Secondly, if Silin did not say anything, these people would probably turn Seven Lights, or even a couple of sectors, into chaos. At the same time, at the research division, the chief Mo Heng had been locked inside the workshop ever since he returned from the hospital. Whenever the others recalled Mo Heng's ugly expression and low pressure when he returned, they immediately swallowed their words. Everyone thought that Mo Heng was sad because his beloved disciple was assassinated, but that was not the case. Mo Heng was in a very bad mood, but not because he was sad, but because he was depressed. He knew that something like this would happen to Silin a long time ago. Before Silin went to participate in the integrated warfare tournament, the machine he assembled had a password on it. It was something that only a machine member would understand, but even if a machine member knew it, they would not understand the meaning of the password. This was because the password was arranged according to a person's habit, and different people would see different information. Therefore, unless one knew the sequence of the password, they would only see a bunch of garbled codes. From those passwords, Mo Hung learned of Silin's plan, and he also knew that Silin would leave just like this. Although Silin promised that he would contact Mo Hung in the future, Mo Hung still felt suffocated in his heart. Now that Silin had left, he could no longer boast openly. Kong Man, Hard and the others felt that the assassination of Silin was unreal. It was as if they still could not accept it. Just a moment ago, such a powerful and outstanding person was discussing the welcoming banquet with them, and in the next moment he was gone just like that. To them, it must be said that it was a huge shock. Lung put up a bounty of 100 million to find the true culprit. Of course, this was just a cover. Otherwise, if something had really happened to Silin, with the temperament of young Master Lung's Andriera family bloodline, the bounty would not be just 100 million. Since the investigation had not made any progress, Seven Lights announced to the public that it might be Blackthorn's doing. This statement was given by Aflon of the Duance family, so Seven Lights followed it. Moreover, this statement could reduce Seven Lights' responsibility to the minimum, so the higher-ups of Seven Lights were happy to see it. 20 days later, on a starship at Sector D, a brawny young man with brown hair and a simple and honest-looking body walked into a room with a backpack on his back. The person inside had been waiting for a long time already. "Long time no see, Captain," the young man said with a simple and honest smile. "Welcome back, Silin." Chapter 81. There was another person in the room other than Shotten. It was a girl who looked to be around 6 or 7 years old. She was sucking on a lollipop and was engrossed in a gunfight game. She ignored Silin's entrance and kept her eyes glued to the screen. "The payment has been received. It looks like Aflon is very satisfied with this matter." Shotten flicked the card in his hand and said, "Silin Duance had already disappeared from this world. Not even Aflon would know what Silin looked like right now." Aflon, who had obtained the position of heir, very generously gave out the payment. One portion was Silin's, and the other belonged to the 6th team. The payment this time alone was enough to cover the daily expenses of the 6th Division for an entire year. It had been almost a year since Silin accepted the mission. During this time, no one in the 6th Division knew of Silin's existence or whereabouts except for a few individuals. It was only when the mission was over that Shotten told Yudi, Carrie, and the others about Silin. This was because they had met Silin for the first time, and they were also part of the Dia squad. They would continue to get along in the future. For you. The little girl who was playing raised her head to look at Silin after finishing a round. Her big sky-blue eyes were filled with vigilance and curiosity. Silin was also very curious. Shotten had actually brought this little girl with him. Could she be his illegitimate daughter? But it didn't look like it. Shotten smiled and pointed at Silin, introducing him to the little girl. "This is Silin." Then he pointed at the little girl and said to Silin, "This is the new member who joined not long ago, Tang Chiochio." Before Silin could be surprised by such a young new member, Tang Chiochio cried out, "Impossible! Silin doesn't look like this." Silin pulled over a chair and sat down in front of her. "I am Silin. Do you have any objections?" "You're not. Silin has light gray hair, and his eyes aren't like yours. They don't look alike, and Silin is thinner than you," Tang Chiochio said with certainty. "I had plastic surgery." "You're talking nonsense." "I'm not talking nonsense." "You're just talking nonsense." "I'm not spouting nonsense." What about me? What makes you think I'm not Silin?" "Because I was the one who shot him," Tang Kukikyu roared angrily. Silin was shocked and looked at Shotten. Shotten nodded. Silin had always thought that the one who opened fire at Seven Lights Port would be Shotten, because Shotten had said that he would personally take action during their discussion. With the leader of Vanguard Division 6 personally taking action, it would be very difficult to track him down. Moreover, the incident was completed perfectly. Up until now, Seven Lights had yet to discover the suspect who fired the gun. But who would have thought that it would be this little girl who fired the gun? No wonder those people couldn't find the suspect. She was just an innocent and adorable little girl who was eating a lollipop in the crowd. Who would have thought that she would shoot someone? Chiochio, he really is Silin. He just changed his appearance, that's all. It's a mission. Shoten walked over and rubbed Tang Qiuqiu's head and said. Tang Qiuqiu scanned Sillin from head to toe before jumping off the chair and circling around Sillin twice. I don't feel like they're the same person at all. That's why I said he's an excellent hunter. Although Shoten didn't know how Sillin had turned from his previous appearance to his current appearance, and Shoten couldn't quite believe that Sillin had gone through plastic surgery on his entire body, these were his team members' secrets. Who didn't have a trump card up their sleeves? That was why he wouldn't ask too many questions. As long as the person was capable and had a trustworthy character, the sixth team would welcome them. I'll be even better than him in the future. Tang Qiuqiu returned to her seat and sat down. She unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth before continuing to play the game. Shoten gave her a look and gestured for Sillin, said that they should talk in the adjacent hall. There are a couple of newbies other than you this time, and they're all from Dias's squad. Speaking of which, you should know them. You've already met Ba Zong and Koi behind the smile on the sector championship platform. Ba Zong's original name is Ba Dao, and Koi behind the smile's original name is Xiao Shang. They were sent to higher education institutions because their ages met the requirements. We may be hunters, but we're also cultured hunters. The moment Shoten mentioned Ba Zong and Koi behind the smile, Sillin immediately knew that those two guys were pretty good. The other newbie who's also under Dias is Tang Qiuqiu. When he mentioned Tang Qiuqiu, Shoten sighed heavily. She's from Sector V. Sector V was one of the more chaotic sectors among the 13 backward sectors. Because it was farther away from the other sectors that were more developed, it was ranked at the back of the 13 backward sectors. It was far worse than Sillin's home Sector X. The livable planets were plagued by the flames of war all year round, and the situation there was even more complicated than that. The League of Stars' garrison at Sector V would not interfere, and they wouldn't act so early. At the very least, they would wait until the people there were almost done fighting before sending out their troops to suppress them. Since the development of civilization, when the people of Sector V came into contact with these high-end civilizations, they would divide into many factions and occupy an advantageous position through war. The foreign forces would infiltrate and provide them with weapons and wealth. At the same time, the invading forces would buy manpower and expand their territory. Moreover, there were many children in that sector who were reduced to war slaves from a young age. The first thing they picked up was not a spoon, a doll, or a starship model, but a gun. The adults in the war zones would teach them how to use a gun and kill people. They would convince them that killing was the happiest thing in the world. There were many children who weren't even as tall as a gun when they killed their first person. Killing was to survive, and to them, it was like killing fish to eat. There wasn't much to it. Basically, the children of Sector V did not have the so-called innocence that belonged to that age. Instead, they had numb and empty eyes, and their lives might not even be as long as a G-rank genotype. This was especially true for girls. The slightly older teenage girls had to carry guns into battle, and were used as tools for men to vent their lust. In that case, Tang Qiuqiu should be one of them. Qiuqiu looks like she's only 6 or 7, but she's actually 8 already. She looks thinner and weaker than the average child due to early malnutrition. We met her when we went to Sector V to hunt down a prey. Dias said that she was the only child he had seen in Sector V who wasn't dyed black by the smoke of war. At the time, none of our companions believed him, because when we saw Tang Qiuqiu, she was holding a gun and blowing up an adult's head expressionlessly. Shoten took out an electronic notebook and brought up a picture. This is Tang Qiuqiu at the time. Sillin looked over. On the electronic notebook, there was a little girl with dry, messy hair and a face covered in dust. She was carrying an old rifle that was about the same length as her expressionlessly. The background was a street filled with blood type and violence, restlessness and noise. You know, Dias may not be outstanding in other aspects, but he's a good judge of character. At the time, Dias had tossed away his gun in front of Tang Qiuqiu and walked towards her with a kind smile. He signaled us not to follow, not to take out our guns, and it would be best if we didn't look in his direction. At the time, when we saw Qiuqiu pointing a gun at Dias, if Dias hadn't told us not to act rashly, we might have opened fire. At the time, we were so scared that we were drenched in sweat. When he said this, Shoten couldn't help but laugh. Diaz didn't pay attention to Chiyochio's gun barrel. He walked in front of her and took out a few sugar balls he bought along the way to grind his teeth and passed them to her. At first, Chiyochio's eyes were filled with caution and suspicion. Then, Diaz picked up one of the sugar balls, peeled off the wrapper, and stuffed it into his mouth. He smacked his lips and chewed on it loudly. Perhaps it was the sweet smell of the fruit that attracted her. When Diaz peeled off the wrapper and passed it to her, she caught it and stuffed it into her mouth. After she stuffed the candy into her mouth, she smiled at Diaz. Shoten brought up another picture. Sillin looked over. The electronic notebook still showed that face covered in dust, but the cold gaze from before was gone. It was a very clean smile. At that moment, those eyes were as free as the sky. Chapter 82. Diaz had bought Tang Chiyochio from Sector V. In reality, a war slave of Tang Chiyochio's age was worth less than 1,000 galactic credits. It could be said to be extremely cheap, and a lot of people from other sectors would buy war slaves from there. Due to the environment, these war slaves were basically cannon fodder. They basically had no names in the war zone, so after she was bought, Diaz had asked her to change her name. And so, Tang Chiyochio was born. Since everyone needed to complete a mission before they could officially join the team, Shoten had passed the assassination mission to Tang Chiyochio after a series of tests and training. After all, Tang Chiyochio's qualifications were much better than Shoten's. The team has been active in Sector T recently. Diaz's squad is hunting alien beasts. When you and Tang Chiyochio arrive at the transit planet, you and Tang Chiyochio will meet up with them. I'll return to the main starship directly. I have other matters to attend to over there. Shoten explained the following arrangements to Sillin. As the 6th Division's captain, Shoten was very busy. All right, I understand. The remuneration you receive belongs to you yourselves. The team will not ask for additional bonuses. Buy whatever you want. You can be considered a little rich now. Shoten said with a smile. It was true that Sillin had gotten a lot of money from Aflon for this mission. In total, it was almost 100 million galactic credits. This was something he and Shoten did not expect at first. Before they arrived at Sector T, Sillin and Tang Chiyochio played a little gunfight since they had nothing to do. It had to be said that the kids who grew up in Sector V were different from the rest. Not only were they decisive when firing a gun, their judgment was also very accurate. Otherwise, Shoten wouldn't have let her be the shooter. As long as the target wasn't moving at high speed and was within her shooting range, Tang Kikikyu could be said to be 100% accurate. After coming into contact with the 6th team, Tang Kikikyu had met a lot of great shooters. She had been exposed to all kinds of gun models. At the same time, she had learned very quickly. She had mastered almost every type of gun as soon as she got a hold of it. Children at this age had a very strong learning ability. However, she seemed to learn things that she shouldn't have learned very quickly. Fuck. What the hell? Puff. Shoten, who was enjoying his tea, spat out a mouthful of tea. Sillin looked at Shoten speechlessly. This sentence coming from the mouth of an 8-year-old child was too shocking. Moreover, it was a girl. Who taught her this? However, the person who spoke didn't seem to realize it at all. He was still sucking on his lollipop and frowning at the screen. Ahem, Tang Chiyochio, girls should be more refined. Shoten didn't know what to say. He had no experience in teaching children. Tang Kikikyu was puzzled. Can I say this? Big brother Xiaoshang often says this. Xiaoshang, you're asking for a beating. It's fine if you say it normally, but how dare you say such nonsense in front of a child? Shoten gritted his teeth. Sillin, when you see that bitch Xiaoshang, punish him. Yes, sir. Shoten turned around and straightened his face. Tang Kikikyu, Xiaoshang and the others can say that, but you can't. It's not good for a girl to say that. Tang Kikikyu frowned. But it feels quite exciting. Exciting my ass. Shoten almost cursed it out loud, but he retracted his words in a daze. A single mistake may cause everlasting sorrow. Xiaoshang, your sins have deepened yet again. Diaz's squad loved to act like hooligans the most. As the saying goes, a crooked stick will have a crooked shadow. If even Diaz behaved like that, then there was no need to even mention the rest of the squad. Carrie and Xiaoshang would always spout nonsense whenever they ran into each other. However, Tang Kikikyu chose to stay in Diaz's squad. She refused to go to any other squad at all. Such a beautiful flower wasn't dyed black in the smoke of Sector V, but died in the 6th squad instead. Shotten dared not imagine what kind of person Tang Qiuqiu would become in an environment where hooligan words flew everywhere. Shotten said seriously, "Tang Kikikyu, it's not beautiful for a girl to say such things." However, Tang Qiuqiu's frown grew deeper. Her expression clearly said, "What is beautiful? Why must it be beautiful?" Both Shotten and Silin fell silent. That's right. In Sector V, everything other than life and death were fleeting clouds. Beauty and ugliness were all equal after a single shot. Ahem, Tang Qiuqiu, are you unhappy about losing? Shotten changed the topic and stopped dwelling on that sentence. The next time he saw Xiaoshang, he was definitely going to give that kid a good beating. The moment the topic was brought up, Tang Qiuqiu pouted, "I lost by 1 point." Tang Qiuqiu did not have this many expressions when she was still at Sector V, but after she came into contact with the 6th squad, her expressions gradually became richer. When she saw some children pouting when they were dissatisfied or conflicted on TV or in magazines, she followed suit. Diaz even recorded a video of Tang Qiuqiu practicing pouting in front of a mirror. It was very funny but also somewhat sour. You lost by 10 points at the beginning, but haven't you been losing less and less in the last few rounds? You've improved a lot. Although Silin had gone easy on her, he could clearly feel Tang Qiuqiu's improvement. Her absorption ability was too strong, and her adjustment speed was too fast. Tang Qiuqiu did not speak. She bit down on the lollipop as fiercely as if it was Silin, crunching loudly. One more round. Tang Qiuqiu rolled up her sleeves and prepared for battle. We'll talk about it next time. We still need to find the lieutenant commander and the others after we reach Sector V. Alright, let's go find Brother Diaz first. We'll compete to see who can hunt more alien beasts then. Maybe we'll catch up and hunt more than Carrie and the others. Yeah, and there's that slut brother Xiaoshang too. Shotten, who was walking out of the door, stumbled and nearly fell to the ground. As expected, words should not be spoken carelessly. Tang Qiuqiu, slut, isn't a good word. Girls shouldn't say it carelessly. Seeing Silin and Shotten's serious expressions, Tang Qiuqiu continued to pout. Fine, I won't say it. After entering Sector T's transit planet, TC-100, Shotten separated from them. Someone was to receive him back to the main starship, while Silin and Tang Qiuqiu bought a flight to planet TH-001. Now that Silin and Tang Qiuqiu both had new IDs, it was not difficult for Vanguard to obtain such legal IDs. The flight was still more than half a day away, so Silin brought Tang Qiuqiu to eat a good meal first. Tang Qiuqiu's appetite was larger than the average child of her age, but she was not a picky eater. Moreover, she would try her best to finish everything she ordered. After experiencing true hunger, Tang Qiuqiu did not like to waste food. Silin looked at the time. There were still more than 5 hours before the flight. He brought up the surrounding map and looked at it. Then he said to Tang Qiuqiu, who was drinking fruit juice, "Qiuqiu, there's still 5 hours before the flight departs. How about we go for a walk? There's an amusement park nearby. We'll be done after a while, so we don't have to sit here and do nothing." Tang Qiuqiu's eyes lit up the moment she heard amusement park. She had only seen it on television and magazines, and had never experienced it herself. Seeing the children in the video seem to be having a good time, Tang Qiuqiu was tempted as well. Alright, let's go to the amusement park. Tang Qiuqiu carried a glass of fruit juice out of the restaurant with Silin and took a taxi to the amusement park. Chapter 83. I want that. Tang Qiuqiu looked excitedly at the variety of candies displayed on the counter. These candies were exquisitely packaged, and the cute boxes were more attractive to children than the candies inside. But why was she referring to the poop green dinosaur and not the pink bunny dolls beside it? However, this was a vending machine, and there was no human salesperson. If there was, the salesperson would definitely look at Tang Qiuqiu strangely. Since Tang Qiuqiu liked it, Silin wouldn't say much. After swiping the card, he took out the poop green dinosaur candy box and handed it to Tang Qiuqiu. Tang Qiuqiu took it excitedly. "Why did you choose this? The little animal boxes beside it are cuter," Silin asked. "Because it looks like a miantuan." Tang Qiuqiu smiled happily. The miantuan was Yudi's weird mutated chameleon. After playing around for a while, an ordinary child would have been tired to the point of collapsing. However, although Tang Qiuqiu looked thin and weak, her physical strength was extraordinary. After 3 hours, she was still full of energy. Silin let Tang Qiuqiu ride on his neck, so that Tang Qiuqiu could see the scene in the distance. Now, Silin's body was obviously much thicker, and with Tang Qiuqiu's small figure, it looked a little warm. "Oh, what's that?" Tang Qiuqiu rode on Silin's neck, one hand holding Silin's head, and the other pointing in a direction. Silin looked in the direction she was pointing, and there was a big cotton candy balloon floating there. "That's cotton candy." In fact, the word cotton candy was floating next to the balloon, but Tang Qiuqiu only recognized the word candy. When she was at Sector V, she was basically illiterate, and even the language she spoke was the native language of that place. She had very little contact with the League of Stars common language, and although she had learned some after joining the 6th team, she wasn't familiar with it. That was why Tang Qiuqiu would always memorize what others said and enrich her own language. The marshmallow seller was surrounded by many children. They were drooling as they looked at the cute marshmallows on display. They pulled the adults beside them and asked to buy them. "Which one do you like?" Silin asked. Since Tang Qiuqiu was riding on Silin's neck, she could see all the marshmallows on his neck clearly. "That." Tang Qiuqiu pointed at a cotton candy that was making a funny face. "Boss, I want the one that makes faces. Also, make one custom-made just like us." "All right, but it will take about 10 minutes. "All right." Silin paid the money first. These marshmallows were all freshly made and sold like hotcakes. They were bought almost immediately after they were made, and some of the people waiting had chosen to have them custom-made. At first, Silin wanted to take Tang Qiuqiu to other places for a spin, but Tang Qiuqiu didn't want to leave. She just wanted to watch how the man made the marshmallows. When the surrounding children saw Tang Qiuqiu riding on Silin's neck, they pestered the adults beside them to do the same. Tang Qiuqiu glanced at them and smiled brightly. When they returned to the airport, Tang Qiuqiu chewed on the marshmallows all the way. Silin carried a big bag full of marshmallows in his hand. Of course, there was also a bottle of tooth protector. Otherwise, Tang Qiuqiu's teeth would go bad if she ate the way she did. It didn't take long for Tang Qiuqiu to fall asleep on the TC-100 to TH-001 flight. She had too much fun today, and she was a child after all. She needed rest. When she fell asleep, there was still a smile on the corner of Tang Qiuqiu's lips, and she was hugging the dinosaur candy box in her arms. Silin pressed a button next to the seat, and a panel popped out. Then, Silin began flipping through the magazines on it. There were a lot of things reported in the electronic magazines recently, and Silin saw things about him while he was flipping through them. Assassination of the Duance family's heir's son, 7 Lights genius assassinated. Many of the details in the magazines had been diluted. They did not mention 7 Lights' negative influence, and many of them even absolved 7 Lights of responsibility. This meant that the higher-ups of 7 Lights had done their best. The title alone was enough to shock anyone, but there wasn't much description. There wasn't even an image or video, and it was heavily diluted. Even Silin's name did not appear, and only replaced it with the Duance family's heir's son. It looked like Aflon had taken care of it himself. This matter was also linked to another matter regarding the Duance family. Aflon had used iron and blood to deal with the people inside the family, and blamed the assassination on them as well. He used the assassination as an excuse to make people think that Aflon was standing on the side of reason. After they arrived at planet TH-001, they would have to change to another passenger ship if they wanted to meet up with Diaz and the others. There were many small passenger ships docked at planet TH-001's main port, and they were all heading to different planets. In Sector T, planets that began with H were all hunting planets. These planets were not habitable planets for humans, and were basically the world of beasts. Hunters liked to come here to hunt, and then transport their prey to be sold to buyers. The beasts on the planets in this region were all very special, and most of them were treasures from head to toe. Their skin, fur, horns, teeth, bones, and so on were all very popular outside. However, in order to ensure that the alien beasts in this region could continue to survive, the League of Stars had made a pact that forbade the use of weapons of mass destruction, radioactive weapons, or the destruction of the environment on these planets. Sometimes, hunters would be fined if they accidentally used some slightly heavier weapons and destroyed a certain mountain or a certain forest. In serious cases, they might even be sent to prison. Diaz's squad's hunting spot was at planet TH-036. When Sillin and Tang Qiuqiu arrived there on the passenger starship, they immediately saw the familiar starship docked at the spaceport. The big dagger symbol on the starship was very eye-catching, and it was also a reminder to those rascals that they would have to think twice before trying anything funny. At this time, the squad's starship should only have the staff who stayed behind to guard it, and the core members should have gone hunting on the planet. But coincidentally, a space plane flew out of the planet at this time and entered the starship. When Sillin and Tang Qiuqiu entered the starship, they saw Carrie commanding the people to unload things from the space plane. Qiuqiu, you're back. Carrie walked over. He was going to hug Qiuqiu, but he gave up in the end when he saw the red and blue alien blood on his body. Seeing Carrie looking at him with a puzzled expression, Sillin smiled and said, "Long time no see, Carrie." Carrie grew even more puzzled. He was sure that he had never seen this person in front of him before. This person looked stupid. Tang Qiuqiu giggled. It looked like she wasn't the only one who couldn't recognize him. He's Big Brother Sillin. The fact that Tang Qiuqiu was able to add the word Big Brother behind Sillin's name meant that she had now acknowledged Sillin. Previously, she would just call him Sillin or not. Sillin. Carrie's jaw dropped as he looked around, then he said in realization, "No wonder the vice captain said you've changed a layer of skin." Chapter 84. The space plane Carrie drove over was loaded with the results of their hunts. The skin and bones of various exotic beasts had already been processed and sorted. The starship's logistics staff would deal with these things further. After the goods were unloaded, Carrie drove the space plane back to the planet. Sillin and Tang Qiuqiu followed along. Tang Qiuqiu had been holding back for a long time. She had been playing with her gun on the space plane. Tang Qiuqiu's gun had been modified. The body of the gun was lighter, and the recoil wasn't as strong as the guns she used in the past. However, its lethality was much stronger than the old rifles she used in the past. There were some bullets on the side. Laser-type firearms would burn the skin and fur of exotic beasts, and they wouldn't be sold for a high price. Laser-type firearms weren't very safe in dry forests, and could easily attract the attention of exotic beasts. Therefore, hunters preferred to use modified bullets. Some of these bullets were specially used to capture living creatures. The bullets would be filled with drugs, and after hitting the prey, the bullets would dissolve in the blood and release the drugs. Taking advantage of this time, Carrie took out thermal clothes for Sillin and Tang Qiuqiu to wear and explained the situation on the ground. Although there were many species on this planet, the environmental conditions weren't that optimistic for humans. The temperature was below zero all year round. Most of the exotic beasts on this planet had thick fur or scales, and they were very fierce. Some of the seemingly harmless animals were actually even more ferocious. Normally, beasts in cold and warm regions tend to be larger in size. The cats here are about the size of leopards in other sectors. Carrie said blabbermouth. Tang Qiuqiu tilted her head. How do you know they're cats and not leopards? One night, I heard them meowing. Sillin didn't wait for Carrie to finish and immediately covered Carrie's mouth. It was better not to use that word in front of a child. Carrie didn't understand at first why Sillin wanted to stop him from speaking. Wasn't it just cats meowing in heat? But when he looked at Tang Qiuqiu's inquisitive gaze, he immediately understood. Yes, a leopard's cry is different from a cat's, Carrie said with a serious expression. Tang Qiuqiu thought for a moment. That made sense and didn't continue on this topic. Cylin and Carrie looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. Things were really different with a child in the team. They still had to keep their mouths shut in front of her. The space plane landed in front of a 3-story building. A similar space plane was parked around the building, and someone was loading goods into it. This time, it was basically filled with living creatures, stored in specially made cages. Because they had been injected with medicine, those exotic beasts were all lying in the cages dispiritedly. Carrie pointed at an animal that looked like a squirrel but was 3 times bigger than an ordinary squirrel and said, "Look, aren't they cute like this?" Furry. Girls loved this kind of fur the most, especially when they looked into his black eyes. It was easy to feel pity for him. Seeing Tang Qiuqiu looking at the animals, Carrie went over and asked, "Do you like them?" Seeing that Tang Qiuqiu was staring at the animals, Carrie moved closer and asked, "Do you like them? There's a type with white fur that's even cuter. Many rich ladies like them." Tang Qiuqiu frowned. "What's the point of keeping them?" Carrie was about to say that they were being kept for fun, but he swallowed his words back down. If he said that, Tang Qiuqiu would definitely reply, "Then I'll sell them for money. The money I get from selling them can buy a lot of candies." If he said that, Tang Qiuqiu would definitely reply, "Then let's sell them for money. The money we earn from selling them can buy a lot of candy." This kind of animal would only be lethal when it was wild, and once it was domesticated, it would basically become a soft egg. Those rich ladies were just keeping them for fun. When they had nothing to do, they would touch, hug, and tease them purely for fun. In terms of intelligence, these animals were far inferior to Yudi's mischievous Miantuan lizard. Seeing that Carrie was speechless, Cylin patted Tang Qiuqiu. "Get ready, let's go hunting." Seeing that Carrie was speechless, Cylin patted Tang Qiuqiu and said, "Get ready, let's go hunting." "Okay, let's go hunting." At the mention of hunting, Tang Qiuqiu didn't care whether Carrie answered the question and followed Cylin out. "Hey, wait, I'll go with you." As soon as Cylin came out, he saw Beaver calculating something with his fingers. "What's the matter, Beaver? What happened?" Beaver looked up. "Yo, Cylin, you're back?" Carrie was depressed, and Tang Qiuqiu was disappointed. Beaver could actually recognize Cylin. Actually, Beaver had seen the image of Cylin's new face sent by Shotten, so he wasn't as surprised as Carrie. His surprise period was over. "It's nothing, I'm looking for other places with more exotic beasts." "Oh, are you guys going to look for the vice captain? He's in this position." Beaver brought up the image and pointed at one of the spots. After transferring the map, Cylin, Tang Qiuqiu, and Carrie set off. The 3 of them took a small airship and headed in Dias's direction. Looking down from the airship, the planet's unique cold-resistant coniferous forest belt and some evergreen trees were everywhere. From time to time, they could see a black shadow flashing through the forest, but it was not the prey they were looking for, so they did not bother with it. Dias was currently tracking a group of polar bears, whose fur could be sold for a large sum of money. In this era of high-tech materials, people's pursuit of such primitive fur was even crazier. The higher one stood at the top of the pyramid, the more they liked these things. In the eyes of the noble women, the rare primitive animal fur was equal to precious jewelry, or even more so. The airship's radar showed the creatures in the surroundings, but Cylin didn't completely rely on the radar. He used his eyes to see and ears to listen. This was his habit. Caw 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 caw. A flock of birds flew in the forest, their cries a little frightening. From the radar's information, there were only a few kittens and wolves. Carrie didn't care about them, so he didn't care. Hunting them was purely a waste of bullets. Cylin's ears twitched and he suddenly said, "Carrie, stop." "What's wrong?" asked Carrie as he slowed down the airship. Cylin took his backpack and said, "I'll go down and take a look. You guys go meet up with the vice captain first." "Hey, what's so good about those things? This is just the periphery of the forest. There's nothing good." "It's okay. I'll just go take a look. You guys go first." Cylin took out a hoverboard from the airship's equipment compartment and unfolded it. "I'll catch up with you guys later." After saying that, Cylin stepped on the hoverboard and flew down the airship. "This kid is really..." Carrie shook his head and sped up the airship and left. This kid is really... Licking her lollipop, Tang Qiuqiu asked, "Where's Brother Silin going? Isn't there no good prey over there?" "Who knows? That guy probably had a seizure," Carrie said without thinking. "What's a seizure?" Carrie, after a pause, Carrie answered cautiously, "It's a kind of cramp." Chapter 85. After Silin landed on the hoverboard in the forest, he put away the hoverboard and put it back into his backpack. He took out a bottle of medicine and sprayed it on his body, causing his aura to be almost the same as his surroundings. Then he stuffed his backpack into a crack in the rocks. He snuck towards the direction of the surprised flock of birds. If Carrie had done a sound spectrum analysis with an instrument at the time, he would have discovered a strange wave line. There was a sound that was different from the cries of animals mixed in with the cries of the birds and cats. It sounded a little like a machine, but it was also different from a machine. It was exactly because of this that Silin wanted to investigate. He couldn't shake the feeling that he would discover something. Silin slowly groped his way forward. The animals here were different from humans. Their hearing was very sensitive, so Silin had to be even more careful. If he wanted to know the truth, then he must conceal himself. Although he had sprayed himself with the medicine, Silin had purposely chosen a position against the wind just to be on the safe side. This way, even his aura would not be easily discovered by the animals upwind. The leaves rustled as the wind blew past them, and some needles fell from time to time. It was just a tiny sound, but it was enough to help Silin conceal the sound of his sneak attack. Gradually, Silin could hear a few low growls from the other side and the warning whines of the cats. Further ahead, Silin saw the situation on the other side. There were 6 wolves, 3 cats, no for cats, and a kitten surrounded by 3 big cats. The kitten looked dispirited, its eyes were closed, and its breathing was relatively weak. It was just as Carrie had said. The cats here looked like leopards, and the kitten's size could be considered normal in comparison. The contrast of being surrounded by 3 big cats was too obvious. The cats were big, but the wolves were even bigger. Have you ever seen a wolf the size of a bear? In any case, this was the first time Silin had seen one. However, he had seen a rat the size of a bear back at 7 Lights, so he was not surprised here. But what puzzled Silin was why the 6 wolves would hesitate in front of the 3 cats and ignore the kitten. Logically speaking, be it in terms of size or number, the wolves had the absolute advantage. They shouldn't be hesitating like this, as if they wanted to charge but were afraid of something. Something was wrong. Silin held his breath as he watched the scene. He had a nagging feeling that something was wrong, but he could not find anything out of the ordinary. There was no mechanical activity, no energy fluctuations, only these few animals. One of the wolves growled in a low voice and took a step forward. The fur on the 3 big cats' bodies immediately stood up. Before, it was only the fur on their backs that stood up, but now, they felt like their whole bodies were in a state of tension. Their tails were straightened, and because of the fur standing up, they looked a lot bigger. At the same time, the 3 big cats took half a step back, getting closer to the kitten in the circle. The wolf did not continue to move forward. Instead, it anxiously circled the area, its claws scratching at the ground that was frozen hard due to the low temperature like tofu. Perhaps it was because of the wolf's low growl and the sound of its claws scratching the ground, or the 3 big cats whimpering because of nervousness. The kittens surrounding them struggled to open their eyes. The kitten was leaning against a rock that was not much bigger than it was. There were some primitive ferns in the cracks of the rock. When it opened its eyes, the first thing it did was not look at the big cats or the 6 wolves, but at the few small ferns in the cracks of the rock. The kitten opened its mouth, revealing its fine teeth. It was indeed no different from an ordinary cat, unlike the big cats, whose teeth were ferocious. It bit at the leaves that stretched out from the cracks of the rock, clawed its paws, closed its eyes, and dropped its head. It continued its original appearance, as if biting the leaves had consumed a lot of energy. Silin narrowed his eyes. Something was wrong. Just now, when the kitten opened its mouth, the 6 wolves showed obvious signs of cowering. The wolf in the front even retreated to stand with its companions, as if that was the only way it could regain some courage and peace of mind. Previously, he thought that the 3 big cats had surrounded the kitten to protect it, but the truth was that the 3 big cats were afraid. Since they were so close to the kitten, what the 6 wolves were really afraid of was not the 3 big cats, but the sickly kitten lying there, right? Sillin continued to observe for a while, but there was still no progress on the other side. It could not go on like this. In order to verify the speculation in his heart, Sillin turned his hand, took out a needle, and shot it at one of the wolves. The conflict had to be intensified in order to better resolve this conflict. While they were confronting each other, the wolf that was shot in the butt suddenly jumped up and howled. It wasn't because of pain, but because of fear. The wolf's fur was very thick, and Sillin's needle did not penetrate much of it. However, the highly nervous wolf reflexively jumped a step forward when it felt the pain on its butt. The other wolves behind it seemed to have received the encouragement and jumped forward as well. When the 3 big cats saw that they had actually rushed forward, they also decided to fight to the death. The situation instantly became chaotic. And because of this, Sillin saw a shocking scene. The kitten that was originally lying on the ground, making people feel that it was exhaling more than it was inhaling, suddenly had its head expand, and it was even bigger than the wolf's body. The originally gray fur contracted and changed, and its skin revealed a metallic luster. At this moment, it did not look like an animal at all, but more like a mechanical body. No, it should be a combination of a mechanical body and an animal, because except for this strange mechanical head, its torso and limbs still maintain the original shape of the kitten. The swollen mechanical cat had opened its mouth and swallowed the nearest wolf in one gulp. Then, the mechanical cat head slowly changed back to its original state, and the metallic luster disappeared. Its fur reappeared, and it returned to its original appearance, lying there half dead and half alive, continuing to be weak. When the kitten transformed, the 6 wolves wanted to immediately escape from the battle, but the one closest to it didn't have time to escape and suffered a disaster. The other 5 fled 50 meters away with their tails between their legs, panting heavily. Sillin was speechless. Damn, this guy is King Kong. Although it is not pure, that appearance just now is definitely a mechanical body. Cyborg life form? Sillin had read some articles in electronic journals with high contribution points. Some people mentioned cyborg life forms, but these life forms were very unstable and could only survive for a very short period of time. Many researchers had thought of creating such a cyborg life form, but the results were not as good as expected. Apart from the shortcoming of a naturally formed cyborg life form, the transition between carbon-based life form and mechanical life form was almost perfect. Artificial cyborg life forms could not achieve such perfection, and they were either above or below the balance point. Someone had once speculated on the possible cause of cyborgs' formation in one of Gal's 2 giant publications, Code, but the explanation was very vague. Perhaps it was because Sillin's reading clearance wasn't high enough, and he wasn't able to access the true research secrets. Researchers described this cyborg life form as a miracle in the universe. The core of this life form was a certain matter that was accidentally formed in the universe. This matter could not be replicated, and when it floated to a planet with life, this matter would capture the genetic information of a certain creature. Then, using this genetic information as a template, it would form a similar life form, which was what they called cyborg life form. The universe was a place that produced all kinds of miracles. Sillin didn't know how it was formed, and he didn't know if the researchers had created a perfect cyborg, but the one in front of him was definitely a cyborg that had transformed into a perfect cyborg. Chapter 86. Now, it had returned to what Sillin had seen at the beginning, except that there was one less wolf. The kitten was still lying there dispiritedly, its tail barely moving. However, Sillin did not dare to underestimate this fellow now. He was not confident that he could win against a half-living creature that could swallow a wolf in one gulp. But was this semi-living cat really sick, or was it just pretending to be sick? If it was really sick, the speed at which it swallowed the wolf was simply lightning fast. If it were not for Sillin's good eyesight, which allowed him to capture such a fast movement and some of the details, The scene just now would have looked like a gray shadow flashing and the wolf disappeared. If it was pretending to be sick, it really did look sick and extremely dispirited. If it was in good spirits, these wolves would probably be buried in its stomach. In order to figure out the cat's situation, Scylla decided to wait and see. Knowing that the cat was a semi-living creature, Scylla did not dare to act rashly. But reality did not go as Scylla wished. The kitten, who was lying down dispiritedly, suddenly raised its head and opened its eyes. Unlike its previous confused look, its eyes were wide open, and its pupils had shrunk into a long and narrow line. And the place it was looking at was the direction where Scylla was. It seemed to be very excited. This time, it was not just its head, but its whole body began to change, distort, and transform. But it was only in the process of transformation, and it could not be fixed. Its fur and metal luster alternated between mechanical changes, and its body size was sometimes small and sometimes big. It was extremely strange. Seeing the semi-mechanical cat stand up with its trembling limbs, but it could not take a step, Scylla now believed that this guy was indeed weak. Perhaps it was as the researchers said, naturally formed semi-mechanical life forms could not have a long life. They were not stable enough, and this cat was very obvious. It could smoothly transform between mechanical and carbon-based life forms, but now it could not stabilize even one of them. Previously, this cat had maintained its carbon-based life form because its carbon-based body consumed less energy and lasted longer than a mechanical body. As soon as they saw the cat in such a state, the remaining 5 wolves immediately ran away. The strange cat gave them a very dangerous feeling. In addition to the 5 wolves, the 3 big cats also retreated while trembling. After seeing the wolves leave, they also ran away, leaving the cat that could change its shape without a fixed shape alone. Scylla did not move. In that instant, he suddenly had a very familiar feeling. The A-I chip in his body was excited again. At the same time, he felt that something was about to break out of the cocoon. Scylla looked at the leaf pattern on Jenya's finger. There was something moving restlessly inside. It was that white ball. The cyborg cat stared straight at Scylla, who was 100 meters away. It lifted its leg with difficulty, and its body swayed. After stabilizing itself, it continued to move in Scylla's direction. With every step the cyborg cat took, Scylla could feel that the white ball's restlessness became more intense. Surprisingly, the more the cyborg cat moved, the more energetic it seemed. Scylla could just pull out his gun and shoot it, but his intuition told him not to. If he did, he would definitely be the one to die. Like 2 magnets attracting each other, Scylla's left hand was already raised uncontrollably. There was a domineering force on his left thumb that was pulling him in that direction. Scylla gritted his teeth and stabilized his body, but the force was too strong. Scylla's feet scraped against the ground as he was pulled in that direction. As if dissatisfied with this state, the leaf pattern on Scylla's left thumb began to twist in a spiral, forcibly tearing this subspace apart. The white ball flew out from inside, flew directly toward the cyborg cat, and then disappeared into its body. There was no dazzling white light, nor was there a loud explosion. There was only the cyborg cat lying there, transforming. However, Scylla knew that this was not all. Because of the chip, he felt that something was wrong. The electromagnetic waves and charged particles around him were all changing. At the same time, all the communication equipment on planet TH-036 was cut off. All the power transmission networks were also paralyzed. Even the solar panels could not be used. Diaz was planning a strategy to hunt the polar bears, but he found that his communicator had suddenly lost signal. Strangely, the polar bears that were roaring arrogantly on the hillside earlier were now lying on the ground, trembling. Diaz and the others also felt a little uncomfortable. It was as if their minds were being disturbed by invisible sound waves. However, all the instruments could not be used, so there was no way to find out the reason. The satellites and aircrafts outside planet TH-036 were also affected to some extent. The satellites could not send signals or monitor the ground, and the magnetic and ray analysis instruments could not be used. They could not contact the ground or other planets. Before this, No high-energy particles, rays, or magnetic field abnormalities had been detected at all. Some people said that it might be a stellar flare, but planet TH-036 was relatively far from the star it was orbiting. Otherwise, the temperature would not be so low. There were many planets closer to planet TH-036, but they had never heard of such a thing happening. Of course, it was also possible that the same thing was happening now, but the communication was disrupted before they could say anything about it. No matter what, at this stage, they had to analyze how long this abnormality would last. Only then could they come up with countermeasures. However, without some of the analysis instruments, it was not very possible to get an answer in a short period of time. In the forest on the ground, Sillin looked at the cyborg that was still lying on the ground, unable to stabilize. He did not go closer to take a look. He did not have the confidence to block a blow from such a powerful life form, even if he was in a solidified state. After about an hour, the cyborg cat's form gradually stabilized. It was still a small cat, but it looked full of energy. Unlike the previous dispirited state, its gray fur was also bright, reflecting light under the natural light. When the cyborg cat stabilized, the communication equipment on the planet also recovered and began to operate normally. The cat looked up at Sillin. There was no malice in its eyes, but Sillin would not let his guard down because of this. He maintained a state of vigilance. As long as this fellow made the slightest movement, Sillin would definitely escape immediately. What a joke! Trying to fight against such a cyborg life form? Was he looking for shit? When the cat was within 50 meters of him, Sillin warned, "If you go any further, I'll kill you." Usually, when Sillin really wanted to shoot, he would not say such nonsense. He just wanted to remind the cat to keep its distance, but he was not sure if it would understand. Hearing Sillin's words, the Hui mouse stopped and squatted on the ground. It pulled its ears back and revealed a very disdainful look. What a bad temper. Sillin? It spoke? Fuck, it really spoke. Chapter 87. Sillin stared at the cat that was looking at him with disdain. He really did not remember reading about cyborg life forms that could speak. However, it could also be because he had not come into contact with the real core content of the research. In any case, this kind of life form was really amazing. I didn't expect you to be able to speak. I learned it more than 100 years ago. The cat raised its hand, raised its paw and pointed in a direction. I remember there weren't that many buildings back then. There was only one landing spot on the entire planet. This planet was allowed to be open to hunting by the League of Stars more than 100 years ago. At that time, there were indeed not many human buildings. The direction that the cat's paw was pointing at was where their aircraft had landed. I didn't expect you to live for so long, Sillin lamented. Of course, although I don't know how long I can live, it feels like I haven't grown much after all these years. Hui Mao was very dissatisfied that Sillin doubted its lifespan. Then what happened to you just now? Was that sickly and weak state that you were in? Was it an illusion? Sillin said with disdain. There will always be a period of time every 10 years or so. During that period, I will become weak and unstable. These two states are very difficult to control, and I will also emit an electromagnetic wave that will attract many hostile species to attack me. Those wolves just now were one of them. Sillin suddenly understood. So that was it. They were unstable, but that did not mean that their lifespan was short. The short lifespan that the researchers mentioned was actually when they were periodically weak. If they attracted a stronger species to attack them, they would definitely die. The cat was still talking to itself. Before, I didn't understand why I would emit that kind of electromagnetic wave uncontrollably, but now I know that it's to attract that white ball. I don't know what it is, but I know that the white ball is useful to me. It can stabilize this chaotic and unstable state. Sillin could not feel the existence of the white ball anymore. It seemed that the coincidental formation of cyborg life forms also included the white ball. Cyborg life forms that did not fuse with the white ball could change between the two states perfectly, but they would not be able to maintain a stable state. I feel like you and I are the same kind. The cat looked at Sillin. When it came to this world, it knew that it was different from the living beings around it, but now, Sillin gave it a very strange feeling, an inexplicable sense of familiarity. I'm a normal carbon-based life form, a pure human, pure, Sillin affirmed. I know you're human, so I'm just saying it feels like. Sai, why don't you follow me? Now that I'm stable, I won't be as weak as before. I'm standing at the top of this planet. Not interested. Sillin walked back. He'd better get his bag and look for Dias and the others. Hey, don't go. Do you want me to follow you? The cat ran behind Celine eagerly. Sillin stopped and looked at the cat. This time, he didn't ask it to stop and let the cat walk in front of him. You want to leave? Yes, I'm tired of staying here. I want to go out and broaden my horizons. You can go find other people. There are many people who come here to hunt, or you can sneak into one of the spaceships and go on a free vacation. No. The cat shook its head vigorously. They're not reliable. Either they're too weak, or their character is bad. Sillin squatted down and looked at the gray cat in front of him seriously. Speaking of which, you did remind me of something. What? I went through a lot of trouble to get that white ball. If I sold it to those crazy researchers, I might be able to get a few $100 million, but you took it from me. No matter what, you have to compensate me. You can follow me, but you have to pay your debt. Pay my debt. Sillin took out a knife and scratched some numbers on the ground. You know the polar bears on this planet, right? The kind that can sell for about 10,000 galactic credits each. If the money you owe me is converted into polar bears, it'll be no less than 10,000. Of course, some exotic beasts are more valuable. Some are worth more than 1 million each. That way, you'll save more effort. At this point, Sillin paused and looked suspiciously at the cat in front of him, who was staring at the ground and listening to him. Of course, maybe you can't deal with that kind of exotic beast. Can't deal with it? It raised its claws. I'll prove it to you. Let me tell you, I've never seen a beast that could withstand 2 of my claws. If it's just a show of swallowing a wolf, then forget it. That's just to show that you have a big appetite. That'll cost me more money. The cat snorted through its nose and looked at its surroundings. Then, it swept its gaze across Sillin once before raising its paw and pointing at its own head. Take out your gun and point it at me. Sillin didn't say much. A cyborg should be very powerful. Who knows, it might really be able to carry guns and block cannons. Bang. A gunshot. The cat was sent flying with a single shot. A gray shadow flew far away. Sillin was speechless. Was this proof? But soon, the gray cat ran over and spat the bullet out of its mouth. The bullet was intact and the medicine inside did not leak out. The most surprising thing was that Sillin had aimed at the cat's forehead and not its mouth when he fired. Right now, the cat's head was perfectly fine, and there was not a single change to it. The bullet, however, had come out of its mouth unscathed. Moreover, this kind of bullet was specially made to deal with large white bears. One shot could break their skin. He didn't expect this guy to be able to withstand it. How is it? Not bad, right? Huimao said proudly. You're not embarrassed to be shot away. It wouldn't have happened if I changed forms. Sillin put away the gun and asked curiously, how did you change into these 2 forms? Even the elements changed. A cyborg was a carbon-based life form when it was in biological form, and its elemental composition was no different from that of a normal living being. However, its elemental composition would change when it transformed into a mechanical form. Sillin had never seen a metal like this even though he had worked with Mo Hung for a long time. I don't know. I was born with it. I can easily change elements. It continued to be proud. Let me see it turn into gold. Don't you know what a directional change is? Huimao looked like he was teaching. He stretched out his paw and drew a circle on the ground. This is the elemental composition of my current form. He drew another circle. This is the elemental composition of another form. Then he marked a 2-way arrow between the 2 circles. This is the so-called directional change. Sillin said disappointedly, so you can't turn into gold. Huimao's ears pulled back. He was depressed. He suddenly felt that he was being looked down upon. Forget it. Just make do. Follow me and slowly pay off your debt. At least you might encounter something similar to that white ball. You can perfect yourself, and you won't be sold to a research lab to be dissected by those crazy researchers. The gray cat was about to refute Silen's earlier words, but it immediately quieted down when it heard Silen's last sentence. Actually, it wasn't a bad idea. It was just a few 100 million GL credits, and a couple of valuable alien beasts. Not long after, Hui Mao realized that he was too naive. From there, it had learned the language of the Star Alliance, knew how to remember the year, could eavesdrop on the development plans of the humans on this planet, and could simulate the weapons of the humans. This cat was very proud of this. After all, it was self-taught, talented, intelligent, and had outstanding abilities. Silen shook his head and ignored this guy who was immersed in self-improvement. He took out the hoverboard from his bag, unfolded it, activated it, and left. Hey, wait for me. Hui Mao kicked its legs and quickly hooked the back of the hoverboard with its claws. It jumped up and then lay on the hoverboard with its eyes wide open, looking at the ground getting farther and farther away. Its round eyes were shining with excitement. When the time comes, don't casually say that you're a semi-mechanical life form, lest you cause too much trouble. Yes, I know. Hui Mao knew in its heart that the degree of perversion of humans was unimaginable. It was really not easy to find a reliable person, so it had not let humans discover it for so many years. By the time Silen found Dias and the others, they were more or less done with their work. At that time, the communicator could not be used, and the white bears were all lying on the ground. Although Dias also felt uncomfortable, he knew that this was a rare opportunity, so it did not take much effort to deal with the white bears. Tang Qiuqiu was grabbing Ba Dao's uppermost arm and swinging it. Ba Dao freed 2 of his hands to deal with the animal hide, and the other 4 were for Tang Qiuqiu to play with. Seeing Silen coming over, Tang Qiuqiu exerted strength in her arm and swung it in the air, doing a light somersault in the air and landing on the ground. Brother Silen, you're really something. We've already finished the mission before you came over. Silen laughed and fluttered Tang Qiuqiu's head, purposely messing up her short hair. Tang Qiuqiu did not get angry. She grabbed Silen's fluttering hand and giggled. How many white bears did you catch? Silen asked. A total of 7, and I killed one of them. No wonder she was so happy. When those white bears stood up, they were more than 7 meters tall. It was already very good to be able to kill one, let alone a child like Tang Qiuqiu. Not bad, impressive. Not far away, Yudi, Xiaoshang, and the others looked at Silen in surprise. He had indeed changed his skin. They could not even recognize him. Even his physique had changed. He was more muscular and not as frail as before. Hui Mao was dissatisfied that he was ignored. He jumped down from the hoverboard and walked elegantly to the side to watch the people deal with the white bears. He had eaten countless of these white bears. It was no less than the number of white bears hunted by the hunters every time the planet opened up for hunting. He did not expect that their skin could be sold for money. He had to be more careful in the future. He had to divide the parts that could be sold for money and eat the rest of the meat. Hey, there's a cat. Brother Silen, where did you get this cat? Tang Qiuqiu asked as she looked at Hui Mao, who was strolling leisurely in the field. I picked it up. Why did you pick up a cat? It's a kitten. With such a small size, it probably won't survive for long in the forest. You went for a walk just to pick up this kitten? Carrie said. Hearing Carrie's words, Hui Mao turned his head and looked at him with disdain. Yo, that guy actually looked down on me. That was a look of disdain, right? Carrie shouted as if he had discovered another Miantuan chameleon. It's true. Brother Silen, what's its name? Tang Qiuqiu asked. Hubeilu or Holu for short. Hearing Silen's words, Hui Mao, who was watching with interest as Carrie and Dia skinned the white bear, was rather displeased. However, seeing that he was the creditor, Hui Mao did not argue with him. Hee, it's really cute. Tang Qiuqiu laughed. What's cute about it? It's gray and ugly. Hearing Silen's words, Hui Mao exploded again. You're the ugly one. You're ugly from head to toe. Carrie, who was skinning the bear, slipped and almost cut his hand. Oh my God, this guy can actually talk. Not bad, we can sell it for a good price. Not selling. Not selling. Silin looked at Tang Qiuqiu. She was the one who said, not selling, at the same time as him. If we want to sell it, those white bears are enough. I'll keep it as a companion for the Miantuan. Tang Qiuqiu treasured Hui Mao quite a bit. Dias waved his hand. All right, let's finish what we're doing first. The main ship is starting to rush us. After this batch of goods is done, we'll go do something big. Something big? Carrie's eyes lit up. Boss, are we going to do a 5-year mission? The 6th team had a rule. Every 5 years, they would do something big. It could take half a year, or even 4 to 5 years. If it was a short time, the team members would have a long vacation. If it was a long time, they would not have any vacation at all. The so-called 5-year mission was to report the results to the Vanguard A team. If there were no results, the team's status in Vanguard would drop. On the other hand, if the results were good, the team's status would rise. Chapter 89. A 5-year mission was the standard to measure AB Squadron's overall strength and development. It could elevate AB Squadron into the limelight of the League of Stars in one go, but it could also make AB Squadron the target of scorn and ridicule. This was also Shotten's second 5-year mission after becoming the 6th Division's captain. His previous mission wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. Although he didn't become famous, he didn't tarnish his reputation either. At the very least, it proved his ability as the 6th Division's captain. A 5-year mission was difficult, that was for sure. They might encounter an unprecedented crisis, and no one could guarantee that they would survive a 5-year mission unscathed, not even the captain or the second-in-command. Losing a group of people, but at the same time, training a group of people. The hunter group had grown through such repeated training. Hunters were used to wandering on the edge of life and death all year round. It was precisely because they were used to this kind of excitement and a life of adventure that when they heard that there was a dangerous mission, they didn't show any anxiety or panic. Instead, they showed unbearable excitement, especially the veteran hunters. After receiving Dias's affirmation, Callie and the others cheered. They didn't have much experience in the previous 5-year mission, and they hadn't enjoyed following behind their seniors. This time, they would enjoy it to the fullest. Thinking of this, Carrie and the others sped up their work. Silin joined in as well. Tang Qiuqiu and Hui Mao squatted beside Silin and watched as they dealt with the spoils of war. Seeing that Hui Mao wasn't even blinking, Tang Qiuqiu asked, "Are you interested in this, Hui's?" "Call me Hubeilu." Hui Mao was very dissatisfied. "But we sounds friendly." "Friendly?" Hui Mao was instantly elated. He no longer cared about how Tang Qiuqiu addressed him. However, he didn't mention that he owed money either. Calling him a debt slave was too embarrassing. After dealing with the white bear, everyone returned to the temporary base. After tidying up, they boarded the space plane and returned to the starship docked at the spaceport. Hui Mao walked back and forth on the starship with his tail raised, as if he was patrolling his territory. Behind Hui Mao, the Miantuan eagerly followed. It was not easy to find a fellow on the ship who was not a human like himself. The Miantuan was still very excited. At least he would have someone to share his fate with if he caused trouble in the future. Although the 5-year mission had yet to begin, the people on the starship were not idle. They checked the food storage, energy storage, weapons, and equipment. They also had to carefully inspect the starship. All the old parts had to be replaced. Since they were going to do something big, they could not afford to make any mistakes. Details determined success or failure. Silin and the engineering team member on the starship were inspecting the starship together. The person in charge of engineering on the starship, NG, was also an octopus. Unlike Ba Dao, who was robust, NG was on the skinnier side. Although an octopus was tall, in terms of weight, NG might not be able to match up to Silin. There were many people like NG. They would not rush to the front lines of battle but were part of the logistics team. Of course, the technicians who could stay in a hunter regiment were not ordinary people. At the very least, they would not be lacking in courage. Whenever there was a need, they would pick up a gun and go to the battlefield. During the maintenance, NG and Sillin exchanged their insights. NG really admired Sillin as a young man. Although he was young, he was truly talented and knowledgeable. He was able to see through the key points of some machinery structure with just a glance, and Sillin was also able to listen to opinions and suggestions humbly. It was pretty good for someone his age. NG's 6 arms were busy. Some were holding tools, some were holding parts, and some were holding instruments. Sillin was recording at the side. Alright, this area is done. Let's take a break before we proceed to the next area for inspection. Taking the water from Sillin, NG gulped down 2 mouthfuls. He caught his breath and looked at Sillin's recording. Not bad. Very professional recording. NG was not stingy with his praise. He unfolded a chair and sat down, placing the tools into the toolbox one by one. Brother NG, what's that? Sillin pointed at NG's tool and a small piece of reddish-brown crystal inside. Oh, this. NG smiled. He picked up the small piece and handed it to Sillin. Look carefully. Can you guess what it is? Sillin took the small piece of crystal. This small piece was only half the size of a thumb. Resin. Sillin could distinguish the main components of this thing. At the same time, he saw a creature buried in the bread. It was less than a centimeter long, and its body was semicircular. It had many pairs of legs and a pair of chelicerae. It looked somewhat ferocious. I've never seen this kind of creature. There are many kinds of creatures in the universe. It's normal not to have seen one. NG smiled. Can you guess where the worm inside came from? Sillin shook his head. Although many creatures could be speculated about their living environment based on their body shape, more creatures could not be imagined. Sillin's intuition told him that the creature buried inside was not simple. NG chuckled. He took the reddish-brown small piece, rubbed the surface with his fingers, and sighed. This is a parasite. Parasite? Sillin knew that NG was not talking about human parasites, but parasites that lived on starships and spaceships that traveled in the universe. Yes, this is also something we have to pay special attention to every time we repair the starship. We also have to check it from time to time during long-distance flights. Once we find a parasite, we have to eliminate it in time. Otherwise, there will be endless problems in the future. Just a little bit like this can destroy a huge starship. They can withstand cosmic rays, withstand the vacuum environment, and are firmly nailed to spaceships. Many of the substances they secrete can corrode spaceships. Although it is not visible for a while, it will be troublesome after a long time. When it is really discovered, it will be too late. Do you know what will happen if a hole suddenly appears on a starship when it is flying in the universe and there is no time to repair it? Sillin trembled unconsciously. How terrifying. They will also damage some key parts of the starship, whether it is the weapon system, the energy transmission tubes, or some interfaces. They may become their habitat. There are many kinds of parasites in the universe, and their preferences are different. Some like places with active energy, and some like places with oxygen. In short, what we need to do is to check the starship regularly to prevent future problems. NG flicked the small piece in his hand and caught it again. Every time we do this, we will prepare an embedding fluid. Small parasites like this can be buried in the embedding fluid, just like amber. After the mission is over, we can sell it at a high price to researchers or collectors. Many people like to collect this kind of cosmic parasite. To a certain extent, these cosmic parasites are also very rare. The one in my hand was obtained during the last 5-year mission. This is just one of them. I kept one for myself and did not sell it. It is a souvenir. If you are interested when we find parasites, we will call you over to take a look when we remove them. That's good. Thank you, Brother NG. Kid, why are you so polite? Let's go to the next place for maintenance. After following NG for maintenance, Sillin was ready to go back to the lounge to lie down, but he had only taken a few steps when he heard Carrie's roar. Sillin, look at what your cat has done. Chapter 90. Carrie looked at the storage cupboard in his room, his face livid with anger. He raised his trembling hand and pointed at the almost empty storage cupboard. he said to Silin, who had just walked over, and Yudi, who was wearing strawberry-patterned pajamas and plush slippers. Sleepy, you guys have to be responsible for the evil that your pets have done. Silin glanced at the storage cupboard. It was really clean. No wonder Carrie was so angry. Yudi yawned and said without the slightest sense of guilt, I told you to remember to lock the food cupboard. Who can you blame if it's stolen? How was that reasonable? Carrie was so angry that his eyebrows were almost raised. I locked it. What about the door? The door was not locked. Seeing Carrie's constipated look, he knew that he must have forgotten to lock the door again. Yudi said lazily, How many times has it been? I can only say that you are stupid and have no sense of worry. Carrie wanted to pick up a hammer and smash it. How many times has that bastard chameleon eaten secretly? How dare you say that? That chameleon of yours is as smart as a ghost. It actually knows how to hide its toenails and uses a decoder. Carrie was annoyed at the thought of this. And you, Silin, listen. Carrie pressed the communicator in his hand. It played a recording. This was installed by Carrie on the lock. As soon as the cupboard was unlocked, it would automatically start recording. After a series of rustling sounds, 2 different rhythms of chewing food could be heard. Yudi's mientuan had a specific chewing frequency. Carrie was quite familiar with this. He could even hear the sound of that bastard chameleon sucking food with its tongue. It had to be said that the mientuan was indeed a freak among the chameleons. It had a wide range of diets. It could eat vegetables, eat meat, drink wine, and drink fruit juice. This was not a fucking chameleon, but a demon from somewhere. No wonder when Silin first set foot on the starship, when Diaz mentioned the mientuan, the first thing he asked was, what did he do wrong? He recognized the sound of the mientuan eating, and the other sound should be that of the huimao. Meow. This satisfied meow after eating and drinking made the veins on Carrie's forehead bulge. Carrie's heart was bleeding. His compressed biscuits, jerky, and fruit pies. Hearing this voice, Silin's eyes twitched. Meow my ass. You can do bad things, but don't let people know. Are you afraid that people won't know that you're the only cat on the starship? Sigh, that's enough. Silin patted Carrie's shoulder. When we meet up with the captain, we'll stock up some food. I promise that your cabinet will be filled to the brim. As for that cat, you can treat it as a greeting gift. Maybe when you're in danger, the cat will repay you for saving your life. That kitten that hasn't fully grown yet? Don't judge a cat by its appearance. That little guy is very powerful. Carrie was silent for a while, then waved his hand. Get out of here. I'm going to change the lock. Yudi, tell your mientuan to hide well. Don't let me catch you. In the past, Carrie used to use fingerprint identification. Later, after the bastard chameleon stole his fingerprint, Carrie reflected on it. It was just a fingerprint. Where couldn't he get it on the starship? The guy that had been with Yudi and Beaver for so long was used to this kind of thing. Therefore, Carrie changed the locks one by one to prevent the gluttonous chameleon. Somewhere on the starship, Huimao licked his paws and wiped his face. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. He looked at the mientuan. Are there any food scraps? The mientuan shook his head. That's good. Hee, it's not bad to have a change of taste. Huimao was very satisfied. The mientuan grinned. Finally, he had a companion to eat with him. The mientuan nestled in Yudi's room. It was a lush small tree that was only half the height of a person. However, it was full of leaves. The mientuan liked to sleep on it. After eating, he would sleep. This was the instinct of an animal. However, the mientuan's steps were a little hesitant. After all, he had done something bad again. When he arrived at the door of Yudi's room, he raised his forelimbs and pressed a button. A hole appeared. The mientuan stuck his tongue inside. After scanning his tongue, a small door opened with a beep. He climbed in. His forelimbs landed on the ground. When he looked up, he saw Yudi waiting for him. Hurry up and get in here. Close the door. I have something to ask you. Yudi's voice sounded calm. The mientuan moved in slowly. After the small door was closed, he still leaned against the wall. His eyes darted around, but he didn't look at Yudi. You were caught by Carrie again for stealing food today. The Miantuan's body stiffened and he lowered his head. When you open the lock, remember to check if there's anything else installed on the lock. After a pause, Yudi said, "You didn't open the lock on Carrie's cabinet, did you?" "I remember Carrie changed the lock with multidimensional encryption. I haven't taught you how to open that kind of lock." The Miantuan nodded. "How did he open it?" Yudi took out an electronic drawing board. The Miantuan walked over and started to draw on it with his limbs. It was hard to imagine a dragon could use its limbs so flexibly. Looking at the drawing on the drawing board, Yudi's eyes flashed and he smiled. "Get along well with that cat in the future. It'll benefit you greatly." The Miantuan nodded. "All right, get out and find a place to sleep. You're not allowed to sleep in the nest today. Carrie told you to hide well. Don't let him catch you." Yudi put away the drawing board and stopped looking at the Miantuan. He lay on the bed and continued to catch up on his sleep. He didn't sleep well today before he was woken up by Carrie. The Miantuan looked pitifully at his little green nest and crawled out of the room through the little door. "I'll have to find a place to sleep again today. Forget it. I'll go find that cat. At least I'll have a companion to share the punishment with when Carrie catches me." Huimao didn't fare much better either. He was taught a lesson by Silin, and he even owed him a favor. However, the guy only felt depressed for a moment before he curled his body into a circle and slept soundly. The sixth team's target this time was Sector Z. It was one of the 3 most dangerous and undeveloped sectors in the League of Stars. There were very few official star maps of Sector Z. Almost only the outermost zone was shown. Sector Z was a dark triangle on the overall star map of the League of Stars. Darkness meant that it was undeveloped, and because it was triangular, it was called the Dark Triangle. Of course, this was only public information. If a hunter regiment had explored it themselves, the star maps recorded would either be sold at a high price or kept for their own use. Normally, they wouldn't make them public unless there was something special. If a hunter regiment could discover a habitable planet, then it would be a matter of both fame and fortune for a hunter regiment. The League of Stars had made relevant policies since a long time ago. If a habitable planet was discovered in an undeveloped area, they would allocate a large amount of bounty to the hunter regiment who discovered it. At the same time, they would also report it on high contribution magazines. It was enough to increase the hunter regiment's fame, and some would even allow the hunter regiment to name their own planet. The reason the 4 great hunter regiments were so famous was because they appeared so frequently in magazines that they outshone the other hunter regiments. Shotton's choice of Sector Z was also made after careful consideration and a show of hands by the 6 lieutenant commanders. If they wanted to increase their influence now, they had to produce results. Other than the discovery of habitable planets, the places that truly contained great treasures were the undeveloped areas. Danger and opportunity coexisted. Chapter 91. By the time Silin and the others had arrived at the rendezvous point Shotton had mentioned, the other 5 squads had already returned to their respective squads. After they had merged their starships with the 6th squad's main starship, they reported their hunted goods and traded them to the buyers they had already contacted. However, Silin didn't need to do anything about it. Right now, he was sitting in his room reading a book. It was a book about space parasites he borrowed from Engie. There were a lot of things that couldn't be found on the Federation's major online platforms, and normal electronic publications wouldn't record too much about them. Some of the truly useful things required permission to read. Silin's current identity as a hunter couldn't read some official documents. Hunters usually kept their belongings to their own people and wouldn't easily make them public. The book in Silin's hands belonged to Vanguard, and it wasn't announced to the public. This book was more like a notebook. It was something that the person who wrote it down wrote it down. Although it wasn't the original, at least all the notes were copied exactly the same. Silin could see the mood of the person who wrote it at the time from the handwriting. The person who wrote this notebook was called Communidin, but Engie only said that it was left behind by a deceased senior. He didn't explain too much about Communidin, but Silin could roughly guess the person's identity from the contents. From some of the things recorded in the notebook, Silin knew that Communidin was a member of the 3rd B Squadron. He was probably an engineer on a starship like Engie, but his position was higher than Enji's. This was because Komunidin had mentioned the 3rd B Squadron's commander Nada more than once, and it seemed like he had a good relationship with Nada. The problem was that the current commander of the 3rd B Squadron wasn't called Nada, but Falvi. That being said, 47 years was enough for the masses of humanity to welcome a new generation. Judging from the ephemeris recorded in the notebook, this notebook had been around for a while. The last record was 47 years ago, and there were no other records after that. There were a lot of pictures in the notebook, and they were all of the parasites Komunidin encountered when he was in the 3rd B Squadron. There were also annotations and explanations at the bottom of the pictures, stating the habits and hobbies of the parasites shown in the pictures. As Sillin was reading, the doorbell rang. It was Carrie, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Although he was waiting outside, Carrie's face was full of excitement. "What? Did you win the prize? You look so happy." Sillin closed the book and said to Carrie, who came in, "Hee, I have something to show you." Carrie took out his laptop and brought up a 3D projection. "Look, new equipment. Do you feel domineering? This time, the captain is really going all out." Carrie said excitedly as he switched images. Just looking at the image alone was enough to shock Sillin. There was a wide variety of weapons in this batch, ranging from cold equipment to firearms. Although he didn't recognize many of the strange weapons, he knew that they were expensive just from the plasma guns and shoulder cannons. Carrie pointed at one of the wrist blades and asked sneakily, "Do you know how much this wrist blade costs?" "What material?" "I don't know, but I asked the lieutenant before, and this is how much it costs." Carrie held up 5 fingers. 50,000? 500,000. Truly shocking. Sillin had always thought that he was a little rich, but now he was dealt a blow. "It really is a money-burning job." Seeing Sillin's expression, Carrie said, "You can't be thinking that those lousy guns you used to kill white bears are enough for a 5-year mission, can you? Exploration in the universe is a money-burning job. If your equipment is not good, no matter how many lives you have, it won't be enough. In the last 5-year mission, I remember that when I went to kill a strange creature, it crushed my high-strength alloy knife like it was mud. I almost lost my life." Carrie dragged a chair over and sat down. "Before I became a hunter, I was very naive about everything. Only after I became one did I realize how stupid I was. Luck doesn't come to me all the time, and benefits don't come to me all the time. In the captain's words, we have to be pragmatic. Confidence needs the accumulation of capital. So basically, the trivial missions that we usually do are prepared for the 5-year mission." Sillin agreed with Carrie's words. A few $100 million might seem like a lot, but in reality, if it was really used on high-level missions, it would burn through very quickly. Just like the results published in Glory and Code, they were obtained by stepping on the corpses of countless people and test subjects, and burning through countless amounts of money. Otherwise, how could it be so easy to have such illustrious achievements that would affect the entire League of Stars? Even Ori, the one who created the strange chip, must have sacrificed a lot of people's lives even if he didn't necessarily spend a lot of money on it. Sillin still remembered the failed experimental subjects who were preserved in liquid-like specimens in Ori's laboratory. Looking into Sillin's room, Carrie asked, "Where's that bastard cat of yours?" "He went to patrol the territory." That guy had to patrol this starship every day, clearly dividing it into his own territory. The Miantuan also joined in the fun. However, Sillin did not allow Huimao to step into other starships. He was only allowed to move around in the small team starship. "By the way, Carrie, do you know Komunidin?" "Komunidin?" Carrie frowned and thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Never heard of him." "What about Nada?" I think I've heard of him." "Oh, he's the father of Falvi, the captain of Team 3. Nada was the previous captain of Team 3, but more than 40 years ago." At this point, Carrie paused and scratched his head. "Sillin, some things are hard to say." Sillin waved his hand. "It's okay, I'm just curious." This notebook was written by Komunidin, and Komunidin used to be a member of Team 3. However, Brother Enji said that Senior Komunidin had passed away many years ago. The last record in this notebook was from 47 years ago. 47 years ago. That year, many glorious people fell. Sigh, I've only heard a few words. If the captain doesn't talk about these things, it's better for us not to talk about it. You know, the incident that year involved many people. It's too complicated. The 4 major hunter regiments, the military, and even some political figures were involved. Yes, I understand. Although he said this, Sillin was actually very curious about the incident that happened 47 years ago. After all, he had never heard anything about it until now. However, what Sillin thought was one thing, but he could not show it on his face. All right, I'm here to talk to you about the new goods. As frontline combatants, we have the right to choose first, but our choices are limited. Think about what you want to choose first, and I'll send you the information. The lieutenant and the others are probably coming back from a meeting soon. When they return, we'll depart for Sector Z. We must do a good job this time. Not long after Carrie left, Diaz returned from a meeting and notified the members of the squad to go over and instruct them on the relevant matters. Then, the staff members returned to their positions. Although they were connected to the A Squadron's large starship and did not need to do much, they still had to pay attention to some details. They had to be prepared to deal with unexpected events at all times. Amidst the music, the giant starship marked with the Vanguard emblem left Sector T and headed towards their destination, Sector Z of the Dark Triangle. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.